Welcome, true believers, to a journey through the infinite cosmos of Marvel knowledge. Tonight we'll explore the vast tapestry of facts, secrets, and hidden details that make up one of the most beloved universes in entertainment history. From the humble beginnings of comic book pages to the spectacular world of cinema, from the minds of legendary creators to the hearts of millions of fans worldwide. So settle in, get comfortable, and let your mind drift as we walk together through decades of Marvel magic. There's no rush here, no need to memorize every detail. Just let these fascinating stories wash over you like cosmic radiation, gentle and transformative. In the autumn of 1961, something extraordinary happened in the world of comic books. A new company called Marvel Comics published Fantastic Four #1, and with it, launched what would become known as the Marvel Age of Comics. But this moment didn't emerge from nothing. It was the culmination of decades of struggle, creativity, and the passionate vision of individuals who believed that comic books could be something more than simple entertainment for children. The story begins much earlier, in 1939, when a young entrepreneur named Martin Goodman founded a small publishing company called Timely Publications. Goodman was not a comic book enthusiast by nature. He was a businessman who saw opportunity in the emerging medium of sequential art storytelling. His company operated out of modest offices in New York City, and like many publishers of the era, Timely focused on whatever genres seemed to be selling at any given moment. In those early days, the comic book industry was a wild and largely unregulated frontier. Publishers would chase trends with the desperation of gold prospectors, shifting from westerns to romance to horror to science fiction, based on the slightest market indicators. Timely Publications was no different, producing an eclectic mix of titles that ranged from crime stories to teenage humor comics, always following rather than leading the market. But even in those chaotic early years, there were signs of something special brewing. In 1939, Timely published Marvel Comics #1, featuring the original Human Torch, not Johnny Storm, but an android created by scientist Phineas T. Horton. This character, along with the aquatic anti-hero known as the Submariner, would become the foundation stones upon which the entire Marvel universe would eventually be built. The man who would become the face and voice of Marvel Comics was not yet part of the company in those earliest days. Stanley Martin Lieber, who would later shorten his name to Stan Lee, joined Timely Publications in 1940 as a teenager, initially hired as an assistant to editor Joe Simon. Lee's first published work was a simple text-filler story called The Traitor's Revenge. But even in those humble beginnings, there were hints of the storytelling innovation that would later revolutionize the medium. During the 1940s, Timely Publications experienced both triumph and near disaster. The company found success with patriotic heroes like Captain America, co-created by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby in 1941. Captain America comics became one of the most popular titles of the wartime era, with the Star-Spangled Sentinel punching Adolf Hitler on the cover of his first issue, months before America officially entered World War II. This bold political statement demonstrated that comic books could be more than escapism. They could be vehicles for social commentary and moral instruction. However, the end of the war brought challenges that nearly destroyed the company. As American soldiers returned home and the country shifted its focus from warfare to domestic prosperity, the appetite for superhero comics diminished dramatically. Publishers across the industry saw sales plummet, and many companies went out of business entirely. Timely Publications survived by pivoting to other genres: horror comics, romance stories, westerns, and humor titles. But the glory days of the superhero seemed to be over. Stan Lee, who had served in the army during the war writing training films and manuals, returned to find a very different comic book landscape. He had been promoted to editor-in-chief of Timely Publications at the remarkably young age of 19, before his military service, and now found himself managing a company that was struggling to find its identity in the post-war world. The 1950s were lean years for what was now called Atlas Comics, as Martin Goodman had rebranded the company. The industry faced new challenges, including a moral panic about comic books led by psychiatrist Frederick Wertham, whose book, Seduction of the Innocent, claimed that comic books were corrupting America's youth. This controversy led to the creation of the Comics Code Authority, a self-regulatory body that imposed strict guidelines on comic book content. These guidelines effectively neutered many of the storytelling possibilities that had made comics exciting. Violence was severely restricted. Authority figures could not be portrayed negatively, and anything that might be considered frightening or morally ambiguous was forbidden. For a medium that had thrived on conflict and drama, these restrictions were creatively devastating. Stan Lee found himself trapped in an increasingly formulaic industry, writing predictable stories about perfect heroes who always did the right thing and never faced genuine moral dilemmas. By the late 1950s, he was seriously considering leaving the comic book business altogether. He had been writing comics for nearly 20 years, and it seemed as though the medium had reached a creative dead end. But Martin Goodman had been watching the success of DC Comics, particularly their revival of superhero characters like The Flash and Green Lantern. These new versions of classic heroes were more sophisticated than their 1940s predecessors, and they were finding an audience among both children and adults. When DC's Justice League of America proved successful, Goodman instructed Stan Lee to create a superhero team for Atlas Comics. This request might have been just another editorial mandate, the kind that Lee had been following for decades. But something was different this time. Perhaps it was his frustration with the constraints of the Comics Code, or perhaps it was his growing confidence as a storyteller. But Lee decided to approach this assignment in a radically new way. Instead of creating perfect heroes who never made mistakes or faced real consequences for their actions, Lee wanted to create characters who were fundamentally human, despite their extraordinary abilities. He envisioned heroes who would argue with each other, make mistakes, face financial problems, struggle with relationships, and deal with the same everyday concerns that readers faced in their own lives. Lee's collaborator on this ambitious project was Jack Kirby, an artist who had already established himself as one of the most dynamic and innovative creators in the industry. Kirby had co-created Captain America during his earlier stint at Timely Publications, and his return to the company in 1958 brought with it a cosmic sensibility that would become one of Marvel's defining characteristics. The collaboration between Lee and Kirby was unlike anything the comic book industry had seen before. Rather than working from a traditional full script, Lee would provide Kirby with a basic plot outline, often just a few paragraphs describing the overall story. Kirby would then draw the entire comic book, essentially directing the visual narrative and often adding his own plot elements and character moments. Finally, Lee would add dialogue and captions to the finished artwork. This became known as the Marvel Method, and it allowed for a level of creative collaboration that was unprecedented in the industry. Both writer and artist were contributing to every aspect of the storytelling process, from plot development to character interaction to visual pacing. The result was comics that felt more dynamic and spontaneous than the rigidly scripted books that dominated the market. When Fantastic Four #1 hit newsstands in November 1961, it was immediately clear that something revolutionary had occurred. These were not the perfect, godlike heroes that readers had come to expect from superhero comics. Reed Richards was brilliant but absent-minded and sometimes arrogant. Sue Storm was capable, but still learning to use her powers effectively. Johnny Storm was impulsive and hot-tempered. Ben Grimm was bitter about his transformation and often took out his frustration on his teammates. More importantly, these characters talked to each other like real people. They argued, they teased each other, they expressed doubt and frustration, and genuine emotion. When Ben Grimm looked in the mirror and saw his rocky orange exterior, his pain was palpable. When Reed Richards became so absorbed in his scientific experiments that he ignored his girlfriend Sue, the relationship tension felt authentic rather than manufactured. The success of Fantastic Four encouraged Lee and his collaborators to continue pushing boundaries. The Marvel method was applied to other titles, often with spectacular results. When Lee teamed up with artist Steve Ditko to create Spider-Man, they produced a character who was even more revolutionary than the Fantastic Four. Peter Parker was not a handsome, confident hero. He was a neurotic teenager dealing with bullies, financial problems, and the challenges of keeping his secret identity while maintaining relationships with friends and family. Steve Ditko brought his own unique sensibility to Marvel Comics during this crucial period. Where Jack Kirby's art was bold and cosmic, Ditko's work was intricate and psychological. His Spider-Man moved with an uncanny, almost alien grace, and his depiction of Peter Parker's everyday life was filled with subtle details that made the character's world feel completely authentic. Ditko's other major creation for Marvel was Doctor Strange, a character who allowed the artist to explore surreal, psychedelic imagery that was years ahead of its time. The mystical dimensions and bizarre creatures that populated Doctor Strange's adventures were unlike anything else in comics, and they demonstrated that the Marvel Universe could accommodate any genre or style of storytelling. As the 1960s progressed, the Marvel Bullpen, as the creative staff came to be known, expanded to include other talented artists and writers who embraced the collaborative spirit that Lee had fostered. Artists like Gene Colan brought a noir sensibility to characters like Daredevil, while John Buscema's classical approach elevated books like The Avengers and The Silver Surfer. The Marvel method was not just a production technique. It was a philosophy that permeated every aspect of the company's creative process. Editors, writers, and artists were encouraged to contribute ideas regardless of their official role on a particular project. Colorists and letterers were treated as creative partners rather than mere technicians. Even the fan letters that poured into the Marvel offices were treated as part of an ongoing conversation between creators and readers. This collaborative approach extended to the way Marvel built its fictional universe. Unlike other publishers who kept their characters largely separate, Marvel created a world where heroes regularly encountered each other, where events in one comic book had consequences that rippled through other titles, and where readers felt they were following the ongoing lives of a connected community of characters. The financial success of Marvel Comics during this period was remarkable, but it was the creative innovation that truly set the company apart. By the end of the 1960s, Marvel had not only caught up with industry leader DC Comics, but had arguably surpassed them in terms of cultural relevance and artistic achievement. The Marvel comics of this era were being read not just by children but by college students and adults, who found in these stories a level of sophistication and emotional honesty that was unprecedented in the medium. Universities began teaching courses that analyzed Marvel Comics as literature, and mainstream publications like Rolling Stone and Esquire began taking notice of what was happening in this once dismissed corner of popular culture. But perhaps the most important legacy of this foundational period was the demonstration that comic books could be a legitimate form of artistic expression. The characters, stories, and creative methods developed during the Marvel Comics renaissance of the 1960s provided the template for everything that would follow, from the sophisticated graphic novels of the 1980s to the billion-dollar movie franchises of the 21st century. The transformation from timely publications to Atlas Comics to Marvel Comics was more than just a series of corporate rebrandings. It was the evolution of an entirely new form of popular entertainment that combined visual art, literary storytelling, and mythological resonance in ways that had never been attempted before. The foundation that was laid during those crucial years continues to support and inspire creative work that reaches audiences around the world, proving that the vision of Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, and their collaborators was not just commercially successful but culturally transformative. The birth of Marvel's iconic heroes represents one of the most revolutionary periods in American popular culture, a time when the very definition of what a superhero could be was forever transformed. Between 1961 and 1965, a small group of creators working in cramped Manhattan offices would introduce characters whose influence would extend far beyond comic books, eventually reshaping entertainment, merchandising, and our collective understanding of modern mythology. The revolution began with Fantastic Four #1, published in November 1961. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby's approach to superhero storytelling was so fundamentally different from what had come before that many readers initially didn't know what to make of it. These weren't the perfect, morally unambiguous heroes that had dominated the medium since the 1930s. Reed Richards, Sue Storm, Johnny Storm, and Ben Grimm were flawed human beings who happened to have extraordinary abilities, and their relationships with each other were as important as their battles with cosmic threats. Reed Richards embodied the post-war faith in science and technology, but Lee and Kirby were careful to show that his brilliance came with a price. Reed was often so absorbed in his scientific pursuits that he neglected the emotional needs of his teammates and loved ones. His elastic powers served as a physical manifestation of his intellectual flexibility, but also of his tendency to stretch himself too thin. In Reed, readers saw the first superhero, who was explicitly an adult with adult responsibilities and adult failings. Sue Storm's journey from the invisible girl to the invisible woman would unfold over several years, reflecting changing attitudes about women's roles in society. Initially portrayed as the weakest member of the team, Sue gradually revealed powers that were among the most formidable in the Marvel Universe. Her force fields could protect her teammates or be weaponized against enemies, and her invisibility made her the perfect scout and strategist. The evolution of Sue's character paralleled the women's liberation movement, showing that strength could take many forms. Johnny Storm represented youth and possibility, but also the dangers of acting without thinking. His flame powers were spectacular and attention-grabbing, perfect for a character who craved the spotlight, but they also required careful control to avoid endangering innocent people. Johnny's hot-headed nature created constant tension within the team, yet his enthusiasm and courage often provided the spark that motivated his more cautious teammates. Ben Grimm became the heart and soul of the Fantastic Four, despite, or perhaps because of, his monstrous appearance. His transformation into the Thing was portrayed not as a blessing but as a genuine tragedy, and his ongoing struggle to accept his changed circumstances resonated with readers who had experienced their own forms of alienation or physical challenges. Ben's working-class Brooklyn background provided a grounding influence on a team that might otherwise have seemed too removed from ordinary human experience. The success of Fantastic Four encouraged Marvel to push even further with their next major creation. In August 1962, Amazing Fantasy number 15 introduced Spider-Man, a character who would revolutionize not just superhero comics, but the entire entertainment industry. Peter Parker was everything that previous superheroes were not. Young, insecure, financially struggling, and burdened by genuine moral complexity. The creation of Spider-Man emerged from Stan Lee's desire to show what would really happen if an ordinary teenager suddenly acquired superhuman abilities. Rather than immediately becoming a perfect hero, Peter Parker's first instinct was to use his powers for personal gain. He became a television performer, basking in fame and fortune while ignoring opportunities to help others. Only when his selfishness indirectly led to the death of his beloved Uncle Ben did Peter learn the lesson that would define his character. With great power comes great responsibility. This origin story was revolutionary because it showed a hero learning to be heroic rather than simply being born that way. Peter's ongoing struggles with school, work, relationships, and finances made him relatable to readers in ways that previous superheroes had never achieved. His wisecracking sense of humor served both as a coping mechanism for his own insecurities and as a way to distract his enemies during battle. Steve Ditko's artistic interpretation of Spider-Man was equally groundbreaking. The character's costume completely covered his face and body, allowing readers to project themselves onto the hero more easily. Ditko's depiction of Spider-Man's wall-crawling abilities and web-swinging movement created a unique visual language that captured both the character's grace and his alien, unsettling nature when viewed from the perspective of criminals or bystanders. The world that Ditko created for Spider-Man was distinctly different from the cosmic scope of Fantastic Four adventures. Peter Parker lived in Forest Hills, Queens, attended Midtown High School, and dealt with problems that readers recognized from their own lives. His supporting cast included Aunt May, a frail elderly woman whose medical bills added financial pressure to Peter's already complicated existence. Jonah Jameson, a newspaper editor whose vendetta against Spider-Man turned the hero into a public menace, and a rotating cast of classmates, teachers, and neighbors who provided ongoing subplots and character development. The villains that Ditko created for Spider-Man reflected the character's street-level focus while still providing spectacular visual conflicts. Dr. Octopus, the Lizard, Sandman, Electro, and Mysterio were all products of scientific accidents or experiments gone wrong, reflecting the era's anxieties about atomic energy and technological progress. The Green Goblin, introduced later, would become Spider-Man's most personal enemy by targeting Peter Parker's civilian identity and the people he cared about most. Marvel's next major character introduction came in September 1963 with X-Men #1, a title that allowed Stan Lee and Jack Kirby to explore themes of prejudice and social acceptance through the metaphor of genetic mutation. Professor Charles Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters served as a safe haven for young mutants, learning to control their abilities while hiding from a world that feared and hated them. The original X-Men team consisted of Cyclops, Marvel Girl, Beast, Angel, and Iceman, 5 teenagers whose powers manifested during adolescence, a biological fact that allowed Lee to explore the psychological and social challenges of growing up feeling different from everyone around you. Scott Summers could only control his devastating optic blasts through specially designed glasses, making him literally dangerous to look at directly. Jean Grey's telepathic abilities meant she was constantly aware of other people's thoughts and emotions, whether she wanted to be or not. The X-Men's nemesis, Magnus, later known as Magneto, represented a darker path that mutants might choose when faced with human prejudice. Unlike the cackling villains common in other comics, Magneto believed he was fighting for the survival of his species against human oppression. His methods were extreme, but his motivations were understandable, creating moral complexity that elevated superhero conflicts beyond simple good versus evil narratives. The concept of the X-Men would not reach its full potential until years later, when writers like Chris Claremont would use the mutant metaphor to address issues of racism, religious persecution, and social inequality more directly. But even in their original form, the X-Men established Marvel's willingness to use superhero stories as vehicles for social commentary and philosophical exploration. The Avengers, introduced in September 1963, represented a different kind of innovation: the assembly of existing heroes into a team that was greater than the sum of its parts. The original roster included Iron Man, Thor, Hulk, Ant-Man, and Wasp, characters who had already been established in their own titles, but could be combined for stories too large for any single hero to handle. The premise of the Avengers allowed Marvel to experiment with different character combinations and explore how heroes with vastly different personalities and power levels would interact. Tony Stark's technological pragmatism clashed with Thor's mythological worldview, while Bruce Banner's scientific rationality was constantly at odds with the Hulk's primitive emotional responses. These interpersonal conflicts provided ongoing drama that sustained the series, even when cosmic threats were not immediately present. The Avengers also established the concept of a rotating roster, with members leaving and joining based on personal circumstances and story requirements. This flexibility allowed Marvel to showcase new characters, provide character development opportunities for established heroes, and create dramatic moments around themes of loyalty, sacrifice, and commitment to a cause greater than individual concerns. Thor's introduction to the Marvel Universe in Journey into Mystery Number 83 represented the company's boldest mythological experiment. Rather than creating an entirely new character, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby adapted the Norse god of thunder for modern superhero adventures, complete with his own elaborate mythology and supporting cast drawn from ancient legends. The decision to make Thor's alter ego Donald Blake, a disabled physician who transformed into the god of thunder by striking his walking stick against solid surfaces, created immediate dramatic tension. Blake represented human compassion and medical dedication, while Thor embodied divine power and warrior nobility. The duality between these two identities would provide ongoing internal conflict and philosophical exploration about the nature of power and responsibility. Kirby's depiction of Asgard and the Nine Realms created some of the most visually spectacular settings in comics history. The Rainbow Bridge, the golden spires of Asgard, and the cosmic scope of the world tree Yggdrasil established a mythological framework that could accommodate any kind of story, from intimate character studies to universe-threatening epics. Loki's role as Thor's adopted brother and primary antagonist provided a template for villain creation that Marvel would return to repeatedly. Rather than being purely evil, Loki was motivated by jealousy, ambition, and a genuine belief that he deserved the throne of Asgard. His relationship with Thor was complicated by genuine affection mixed with bitter resentment, creating emotional stakes that elevated their conflicts beyond simple superhero battles. Tony Stark's debut in Tales of Suspense number 39 introduced Marvel's most technologically sophisticated hero and its most complex exploration of redemption and personal transformation. The origin story, set against the backdrop of the Vietnam War, showed a wealthy weapons manufacturer forced to confront the consequences of his life's work when he was captured by enemy forces and forced to build weapons that would be used against American soldiers. The creation of the Iron Man armor served multiple symbolic functions within the story. On the literal level, it was the technology that saved Tony Stark's life and allowed him to escape captivity. On the metaphorical level, It represented his transformation from someone who profited from others' suffering to someone who used his abilities to protect innocent people. The arc reactor that powered the armor and kept Tony alive became a physical manifestation of his changed heart. Don Heck's artwork on the early Iron Man stories emphasized the character's technological nature while maintaining his essential humanity. The armor's design evolved constantly, reflecting Tony's perfectionist nature and his endless drive to improve and refine his creations. Each new version of the armor represented not just technological advancement, but personal growth and adaptation to new challenges. The Hulk's introduction in The Incredible Hulk #1 presented Marvel's most psychologically complex character study, disguised as a monster story. Bruce Banner's transformation into the Hulk was triggered by stress and anger, making him a hero who became more powerful as he became less rational and controlled. This fundamental contradiction created dramatic tension that could never be fully resolved. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby's approach to the Hulk drew inspiration from classic literature, particularly Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and Frankenstein's monster. But their version added psychological depth and social commentary that elevated the character beyond simple horror tropes. Bruce Banner represented the rational, civilized aspect of human nature, while the Hulk embodied pure emotional response freed from social constraints and moral inhibitions. The Hulk's famous catchphrase, "Hulk Smash," became one of the most recognizable expressions in popular culture, but it also perfectly captured the character's essential nature. The Hulk was not evil, but he was dangerous, because he lacked the intellectual capacity to distinguish between genuine threats and minor annoyances. This made him simultaneously sympathetic and terrifying, a hero whose greatest enemy was himself. Matt Murdock's introduction as Daredevil in Daredevil #1 allowed Marvel to explore street-level heroism and the intersection between superhero adventures and legal drama. The character's blindness, caused by a childhood accident involving radioactive materials, resulted in enhanced remaining senses that gave him abilities beyond those of ordinary humans, while still leaving him genuinely disabled in ways that affected his daily life. Bill Everett's artwork on the early Daredevil stories emphasized the character's acrobatic abilities and his unique sensory perspective on the world. Daredevil's radar sense allowed him to navigate and fight effectively despite his blindness. But it also provided opportunities for visual storytelling techniques that were unlike anything else in comics. The character's Catholic faith added another layer of complexity, as Matt struggled to reconcile his vigilante activities with his religious beliefs about justice and forgiveness. The Hell's Kitchen setting established Daredevil as Marvel's most urban hero, dealing with organized crime, political corruption, and street-level violence rather than cosmic threats or mad scientists. This grounded approach would influence decades of subsequent superhero storytelling and establish the template for what would later be called gritty or realistic superhero fiction. Doctor Strange's debut in Strange Tales #110 introduced Marvel's mystic dimension and challenged readers to accept magic as a legitimate part of the superhero universe. Stephen Strange's origin as an arrogant surgeon whose hands were damaged in an automobile accident, leading him to seek healing in the mysterious East, reflected Western fascination with Eastern philosophy and spiritual practices during the 1960s. Steve Ditko's artwork on Doctor Strange pushed the boundaries of what was possible in comic book visual storytelling. The bizarre dimensions, impossible architecture, and psychedelic imagery that populated Strange's adventures were years ahead of their time and would later influence underground comics, album cover art, and numerous other forms of visual media. Ditko's depiction of magical battles relied on abstract shapes, swirling patterns, and surreal imagery that suggested rather than explicitly depicted the cosmic forces at play. The Ancient One, Baron Mordo, and Dormammu provided Doctor Strange with a supporting cast and rogues gallery that operated according to different rules than those governing other Marvel heroes. Magic in the Marvel Universe was presented as a science that operated according to consistent principles, but those principles were so complex and alien that they seemed mystical to ordinary human understanding. These character creations represented more than just commercial success or creative innovation. They established a new paradigm for what superhero stories could accomplish. By grounding fantastic adventures in recognizable human emotions and social situations, Marvel's heroes became vessels for exploring complex themes about power, responsibility, identity, and moral choice. The cultural impact of these characters extended far beyond their original comic book appearances. They established archetypes that would be copied, adapted, and reimagined by countless creators in comics, television, film, and other media. More importantly, they demonstrated that genre fiction could be a legitimate vehicle for sophisticated storytelling and meaningful social commentary. The period between 1961 and 1965 represents a creative renaissance that transformed not just superhero comics, but American popular culture as a whole. The characters introduced during this time provided the foundation for what would eventually become a multi-billion-dollar entertainment empire, but their lasting influence lies not in their commercial success, but in their demonstration that even the most fantastic stories can illuminate fundamental truths about human nature and the societies we create together. The artistic and literary foundation upon which Marvel Comics built its revolutionary approach to superhero storytelling rested on the extraordinary talents of a small group of creators who worked together during the company's most innovative period. These artists and writers didn't simply illustrate and script comic book stories. They invented entirely new ways of visual narrative, developed sophisticated approaches to character psychology, and established collaborative methods that would influence creative industries far beyond comic books. At the center of this creative revolution stood Jack Kirby, a man whose artistic vision was so distinctive and influential that his surname became synonymous with a particular type of visual energy. Kirby's approach to comic book art was fundamentally different from anything that had come before, combining classical figure drawing with abstract expressionist energy and science fiction imagination that seemed to come from some advanced civilization's collective unconscious. Kirby had already established himself as one of the industry's premier artists before joining Marvel Comics in 1958, but his collaboration with Stan Lee unleashed creative possibilities that neither man could have achieved working alone. Where other comic book artists focused primarily on clear storytelling and attractive figure work, Kirby approached each page as if he were directing an epic movie, using dynamic camera angles, explosive action sequences, and innovative page layouts that made readers feel they were experiencing the story rather than simply observing it. The visual technique that became most closely associated with Kirby's work was the crackling energy effect that fans dubbed Kirby Crackle. Small black dots arranged in organic patterns that suggested cosmic forces, electrical discharges, or interdimensional portals. This seemingly simple artistic device became one of the most recognizable visual signatures in comic book history, but it represented something much more significant than a stylistic flourish. Kirby Crackle was a way of depicting energy and power that had no equivalent in photography or film, proving that comic books could achieve effects that were impossible in any other medium. Kirby's character designs combined mythological grandeur with practical functionality, in ways that influenced not just comic books but costume design, toy manufacturing, and eventually movie production. His version of Thor looked like a genuine god, rather than a human being in theatrical armor, while his Fantastic Four costumes were simultaneously practical and iconic. The massive, technological constructions that populated his cosmic storylines, from Galactus's world-consuming machinery to the sprawling cities of the Inhumans, established visual templates that science fiction would draw upon for decades. But Kirby's greatest contribution to Marvel Comics may have been his understanding of how to depict action in a static medium. His fight scenes didn't simply show heroes and villains exchanging blows, they captured the kinetic energy and emotional intensity of combat through carefully orchestrated sequences of panels that built tension, released it in explosive climaxes, and then guided readers into the next story beat. Studying a Kirby action sequence was like watching a master filmmaker edit together the perfect action scene, except that Kirby was working entirely alone with pencil and paper. The collaborative relationship between Kirby and Lee represented one of the most successful creative partnerships in entertainment history, but it was built on a fundamental division of labor that played to each man's greatest strengths. Lee provided the human psychology and emotional authenticity that made Marvel characters feel real, while Kirby supplied the visual spectacle and cosmic imagination that made their adventures feel genuinely fantastic. Together, they created stories that were simultaneously intimate and epic, grounded in recognizable human emotions, but played out against backdrops of infinite possibility. While Kirby was establishing Marvel's cosmic sensibility, Steve Ditko was developing an entirely different but equally influential approach to comic book storytelling. Where Kirby's art exploded off the page with bold, dynamic energy, Ditko's work drew readers into intricate, carefully constructed worlds that rewarded close examination and repeated reading. His attention to detail extended beyond simple background elements to include subtle character expressions, symbolic imagery, and visual metaphors that added layers of meaning to every story. Ditko's most famous creation, Spider-Man, required an approach to superhero art that had never been attempted before. The character's costume completely obscured his facial expressions, meaning that Ditko had to convey all of Spider-Man's personality and emotions through body language and movement. The result was a visual interpretation of superhero action that emphasized grace, agility, and spatial awareness over raw power and dramatic poses. The web-slinging sequences that became Spider-Man's signature visual element were entirely Ditko's invention, and they represented a new form of comic book choreography. Unlike flying heroes who moved through empty air or running heroes who traveled across flat ground, Spider-Man navigated three-dimensional urban environments using his webs as both transportation and weapons. Ditko's depiction of these movements required an understanding of physics, architecture, and human anatomy that went far beyond what most comic book artists had ever needed to master. But Ditko's greatest artistic achievement may have been his work on Doctor Strange, a character who allowed him to explore surreal, psychedelic imagery that was years ahead of its time. The mystical dimensions and bizarre landscapes that populated Doctor Strange's adventures were unlike anything else in popular culture, combining elements from classical art, abstract expressionism, and pure imagination to create visual experiences that seemed to exist outside normal reality. Ditko's approach to depicting magic was entirely abstract, using swirling patterns, impossible geometries, and symbolic imagery to suggest forces and conflicts that couldn't be represented literally. His magical battles looked like encounters between living ideas rather than physical confrontations, and they required readers to engage with the stories on a conceptual level that was far more sophisticated than typical superhero fare. The philosophical complexity that characterized Ditko's storytelling reflected his personal interest in objectivist philosophy and his belief that individuals should be judged by their actions rather than their circumstances or intentions. This worldview infused his work with moral clarity and psychological depth that elevated even simple adventure stories into explorations of ethical choice and personal responsibility. John Romita Sr.'s arrival at Marvel Comics in 1966 marked another crucial evolution in the company's artistic development. Romita had spent years working for DC Comics on romance titles, and he brought to Marvel a sophisticated understanding of human emotion and interpersonal relationships that perfectly complemented the company's focus on character-driven storytelling. When Romita took over the art duties on The Amazing Spider-Man from Steve Ditko, many fans worried that the character would lose the distinctive visual personality that Ditko had established. Instead, Romita maintained everything that was essential about Spider-Man's appearance and movement, while adding his own strengths in depicting the character's civilian identity and supporting cast. Romita's version of Peter Parker was more conventionally handsome than Ditko's interpretation, but this change served important story purposes. As Peter matured from high school student to college-age adult, he needed to become someone who could believably attract the attention of sophisticated women like Gwen Stacy and Mary Jane Watson. Romita's background in romance comics made him the perfect artist to handle these relationship storylines with the emotional authenticity they required. The supporting characters that Romita designed for Spider-Man became some of the most iconic figures in comic book history. His Mary Jane Watson was not just beautiful but charismatic and mysterious, with a distinctive hairstyle and fashion sense that made her instantly recognizable. His Jonah Jameson, was a perfect visual representation of blustering authority, with wild hair and expressive features that could convey bombastic anger in even the smallest panels. Romita's approach to superhero action was less experimental than Ditko's, but more accessible to general audiences. His Spider-Man moved with athletic grace rather than alien agility, and his fight scenes emphasized the physical and emotional stakes of combat rather than abstract visual effects. This made The Amazing Spider-Man one of Marvel's most commercially successful titles, while maintaining the character development and moral complexity that had made the series special under Ditko. Beyond his work on Spider-Man, Romita served as Marvel's art director during the company's most successful period, helping to establish visual consistency across multiple titles while mentoring younger artists and contributing to the design of new characters and costumes. His influence on Marvel's visual identity extended far beyond his individual comic book work to shape the overall look and feel of the Marvel Universe. Gene Colan brought yet another distinctive sensibility to Marvel Comics with his atmospheric, noir-influenced artwork that was perfect for the morally ambiguous heroes who populated the company's more mature storylines. Colan's background in illustration and his interest in film noir techniques allowed him to create comic book art that felt cinematic in ways that went beyond simple visual spectacle. Colan's most important contribution to Marvel came through his work on Daredevil, a character whose blindness and enhanced remaining senses required artistic techniques that could convey sensory experiences beyond normal sight. Colan's use of shadows, unusual panel shapes, and impressionistic rendering suggested Daredevil's radar sense without resorting to literal visual effects or explanatory captions. The Hell's Kitchen setting that Colan depicted in Daredevil comics felt authentic and lived in rather than generic or stylized. His urban landscapes captured the gritty reality of New York City street life while maintaining the larger-than-life quality necessary for superhero adventures. This balance between realism and fantasy became a template for subsequent creators working on street-level heroes. Colan's work on other Marvel titles, including Doctor Strange and Tomb of Dracula, demonstrated his versatility while maintaining his distinctive visual voice. His horror comics were genuinely atmospheric and unsettling, using classic film techniques adapted for comic book storytelling. His approach to depicting magic and supernatural phenomena was entirely different from Ditko's abstract psychedelia, relying instead on mood, lighting, and suggestion to create genuinely eerie effects. John Buscema's classical approach to superhero art provided Marvel with another essential visual voice during the company's golden age. Buscema's background in illustration and fine art brought a sense of weight and dignity to Marvel's most mythological characters, particularly Thor and the Silver Surfer, who required artistic treatment that could match their cosmic significance. Buscema's figure work was among the finest in comic book history, combining anatomical accuracy with heroic idealization in ways that made Marvel's heroes look genuinely godlike. His Thor moved with the power and grace of a genuine deity, while his Silver Surfer conveyed the character's alienation and cosmic perspective through posture and expression rather than dramatic poses or special effects. The collaboration between Buscema and writer Roy Thomas on books like The Avengers and Conan the Barbarian produced some of Marvel's most visually spectacular storytelling. Buscema's ability to handle both intimate character moments and epic battle sequences made him the perfect artist for stories that required both emotional depth and visual grandeur. Marie Severin's contributions to Marvel Comics extended far beyond her individual comic book artwork to include her work as colorist, cover artist, and creative consultant on projects throughout the Marvel line. Severin was one of the few women working in the Marvel bullpen during the 1960s, and her perspective and talents enriched every aspect of the company's creative output. As a colorist, Severin helped establish the visual identity of Marvel's major characters through her choices of costume colors, skin tones, and environmental palettes. Her understanding of how colors could convey mood and personality made Marvel Comics more emotionally engaging and visually distinctive than their competitors. Severin's own artwork, particularly on humor titles and horror comics, demonstrated her versatility and her ability to work in genres that were often considered less prestigious than superhero stories. Her contributions to Marvel's monster comics and satirical publications showed that the company's creative excellence extended across all genres and formats. The writers who worked alongside these artistic talents were equally innovative in their approach to superhero storytelling. Roy Thomas, who joined Marvel in 1965 and eventually succeeded Stan Lee as editor-in-chief, brought a more literary sensibility to comic book writing while maintaining the emotional authenticity that had made Marvel special. Thomas's background in English literature and his encyclopedic knowledge of comic book history allowed him to create stories that worked on multiple levels, providing exciting adventures for casual readers while offering deeper layers of meaning for more sophisticated audiences. His work on the Avengers introduced complex ongoing plot lines that spanned multiple issues and sometimes multiple years, creating a sense of narrative momentum that kept readers invested in the characters' long-term development. The introduction of characters like the Vision and Ultron during Thomas's tenure demonstrated his ability to create new concepts that felt both fresh and consistent with established Marvel continuity. His exploration of artificial intelligence, android consciousness, and the nature of humanity through these characters provided philosophical depth that elevated superhero comics toward genuine science fiction. Jerry Conway's arrival at Marvel in the early 1970s brought a younger perspective to the company's storytelling, while maintaining the character-driven approach that had made Marvel successful. Conway's work on The Amazing Spider-Man included some of the most emotionally powerful storylines in the character's history, including the death of Gwen Stacy, which demonstrated that even beloved characters could face genuine consequences for the dangers they faced. Conway's approach to superhero drama was more soap opera influenced than his predecessors, with complex romantic relationships, family secrets, and interpersonal conflicts that provided ongoing subplots alongside the costumed adventure elements. This approach would influence Marvel storytelling for decades and establish templates for later developments in both comics and other media. Len Wein's contributions to Marvel included both individual character development and larger universe-building projects that expanded the scope and complexity of the Marvel universe. His co-creation of characters like Wolverine and his work on ensemble titles like X-Men helped establish the foundation for storylines that would continue developing for decades. The collaborative culture that developed in the Marvel bullpen during this period was as important as any individual creator's contributions. The company encouraged cross-pollination of ideas between different titles and creators, leading to innovations in storytelling techniques, character development, and visual presentation that benefited the entire line of publications. This collaborative approach extended to the relationship between Marvel and its readers, who were treated as participants in an ongoing conversation rather than passive consumers of entertainment. The letter pages in Marvel Comics became forums for discussing storytelling techniques, character development, and even philosophical questions raised by the stories themselves. The influence of these creators extended far beyond their specific comic book work to shape the entire entertainment industry. Their innovations in visual storytelling influenced film and television production. Their character development techniques affected how heroes and villains were portrayed in all media, and their collaborative methods became models for creative teams working on projects of all kinds. The artistic and literary achievements of Marvel's Golden Age creators established the foundation for everything that would follow in superhero entertainment. Their work proved that genre fiction could support sophisticated themes, complex characters, and innovative artistic techniques, while still providing the excitement and escapism that readers expected from superhero stories. The templates they established continue to influence creative work across all media, proving that their contributions represented not just commercial success but genuine artistic innovation that transcended the boundaries of their chosen medium. The pantheon of villains that emerged from Marvel Comics during its formative years represents one of the most sophisticated approaches to antagonist creation in the history of popular entertainment. These were not simply obstacles for heroes to overcome or embodiments of abstract evil, but complex characters whose motivations, methods, and psychological depths often rivaled or exceeded those of the protagonists they opposed. The Marvel approach to villainy fundamentally changed how audiences understood the relationship between good and evil, demonstrating that the most compelling conflicts arise not from battles between absolute opposites, but from clashes between different philosophical approaches to power, responsibility, and the nature of human civilization itself. At the apex of Marvel's villain hierarchy stands Victor Von Doom, a character whose complexity and enduring appeal have made him one of the most analyzed figures in comic book literature. Doom's origins lie in the intersection of science and magic, intellect and emotion, nobility and megalomania, contradictions that make him simultaneously sympathetic and terrifying. His transformation from brilliant scientist to armored despot was not the result of a single traumatic event, but rather the culmination of pride, ambition, and a fundamental inability to accept that his vision of perfection might be flawed. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby's creation of Doctor Doom drew inspiration from classic literary villains, particularly those found in European folklore and romantic literature, but they grounded his motivations in distinctly modern anxieties about scientific responsibility and political power. Doom's scarred face, hidden behind his iconic metal mask, serves as a physical manifestation of his psychological wounds. the result of an experiment that went wrong because he refused to check his calculations when warned by Reed Richards that they contained an error. This origin story establishes the central dynamic that would define Doom's relationship with the Fantastic Four for decades. His enmity with Reed Richards is not simply professional rivalry, but a deeply personal conflict between two brilliant minds who chose different paths when faced with failure. Where Reed learned humility and the value of collaboration from his mistakes, Doom's pride prevented him from acknowledging any fault in himself, leading him to blame others for his misfortunes and to pursue increasingly extreme methods of proving his superiority. The kingdom of Latveria that Doom rules provides him with resources and moral justification that elevate him beyond typical megalomaniacal villains. As the sovereign ruler of a legitimate nation, Doom can claim that his actions are motivated by the welfare of his subjects rather than personal ambition. The fact that Latveria appears to prosper under his rule, and that its citizens genuinely seem to revere him, complicates any simple moral judgment of his methods and goals. Doom's mastery of both advanced technology and ancient sorcery makes him uniquely dangerous in the Marvel Universe, capable of challenging heroes on multiple levels simultaneously. His scientific achievements rival those of Reed Richards and Tony Stark, while his magical abilities approach those of Doctor Strange. This combination of skills reflects Doom's refusal to accept limitations of any kind. He will not be confined to a single discipline when universal mastery is theoretically possible. The visual design of Doctor Doom, primarily established by Jack Kirby, created one of the most instantly recognizable and imposing figures in comic book history. The medieval armor combined with advanced technology suggests a character who exists outside normal temporal boundaries, drawing power from both past and future. The expressionless metal mask eliminates the possibility of reading Doom's emotions through facial expressions, making him an enigmatic and unpredictable opponent whose thoughts and intentions remain hidden until he chooses to reveal them. Eric Lansher, known as Magneto, represents a different but equally complex approach to Marvel villainy, where Doom's motivations are rooted in personal pride and intellectual superiority. Magneto's actions spring from historical trauma and a genuine desire to protect his people from persecution. His experiences as a Holocaust survivor inform every aspect of his character, from his understanding of how quickly civilization can collapse into barbarism to his determination that mutants will never suffer the fate that befell European Jews. The creation of Magneto during the civil rights era of the 1960s was no accident. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby were deliberately crafting a villain whose methods could be condemned while his goals remained sympathetic, reflecting the complex moral landscape of social change movements. Magneto's willingness to use violence and intimidation to achieve mutant liberation paralleled real-world debates about the effectiveness of peaceful protest versus more militant approaches to securing civil rights. Magneto's powers over magnetism provide him with abilities that are both spectacular and terrifyingly practical. His control over one of the fundamental forces of nature makes him capable of global-scale destruction, while his understanding of electromagnetism gives him influence over most modern technology. The visual spectacle of Magneto lifting bridges, manipulating satellites, or reshaping metal structures provides comic book artists with opportunities for dynamic action sequences, but the true threat he represents lies in his ability to cripple the technological infrastructure upon which modern society depends. The relationship between Magneto and Professor Xavier adds layers of personal drama to their ideological conflict. Their friendship, forged during their younger years before their paths diverged, provides emotional weight to their ongoing battle over the future of human-mutant relations. Each sees in the other a reflection of what he might have become under different circumstances, making their conflict as much about personal disappointment as philosophical disagreement. The evolution of Magneto's character over decades of comic book continuity demonstrates Marvel's commitment to treating even villainous characters as complex individuals capable of growth and change. Stories that have explored his role as a father, his attempts at redemption, and his occasional alliances with the X-Men have revealed different facets of his personality while maintaining the essential tragedy that drives his actions. Norman Osborn's transformation into the Green Goblin represents Marvel's most personal and psychologically disturbing villain creation. Unlike Doom or Magneto, whose conflicts with heroes remain largely professional or ideological, the Green Goblin's obsession with Spider-Man extends to attacks on Peter Parker's civilian identity and the people he cares about most. This crossing of the boundary between costumed adventure and ordinary life established new rules for superhero storytelling that emphasize the potential costs of heroic action. The creation of the Green Goblin emerged from Stan Lee and Steve Ditko's desire to give Spider-Man a nemesis who could match the character's unique blend of spectacular abilities and everyday problems. Where other villains threatened the world or the universe, the Green Goblin threatened Peter Parker's ability to maintain the dual identity that allowed him to have relationships, attend school, and participate in normal human society. Norman Osborn's dual identity as respected businessman and cackling madman reflected contemporary anxieties about the hidden darkness that might lurk beneath the surface of seemingly normal individuals. His transformation was triggered by an experimental formula that enhanced his physical abilities while destabilizing his mental state, but the cruelty and sadism he displays as the Green Goblin suggests that these tendencies existed within his personality before his chemical transformation. The visual design of the Green Goblin, with his Halloween-inspired costume and arsenal of themed weapons, initially appeared almost comical compared to more serious villains like Doctor Doom or Magneto. However, this apparent frivolity made his genuine menace more disturbing rather than less so. The contrast between his ridiculous appearance and his willingness to commit murder created a sense of unpredictability that made him more frightening than villains who looked more conventionally threatening. The death of Gwen Stacy, Spider-Man's first love, at the hands of the Green Goblin, marked a turning point, not just for the character, but for superhero comics in general. This event demonstrated that heroes could not always save everyone, that villains could achieve permanent victories, and that the consequences of superhero battles could include genuine tragedy rather than easily reversible setbacks. Loki's role as Thor's primary antagonist allowed Marvel to explore themes of family dysfunction, sibling rivalry, and the corruption of love into jealousy and hatred. As Thor's adopted brother and a fellow Asgardian, Loki possesses the knowledge and access necessary to hurt Thor in ways that external enemies cannot match. Their conflict is simultaneously cosmic in scope and intimately personal, touching on universal themes of favoritism, inheritance, and the different ways individuals respond to parental expectations. The mythological foundations of Loki's character provided Marvel with a villain whose motivations and methods were already established in ancient literature, but Stan Lee and Jack Kirby adapted these classical elements to reflect modern psychological understanding and contemporary social dynamics. Their Loki is not simply a force of chaos, but a complex individual whose actions stem from legitimate grievances, mixed with personal inadequacies and moral blind spots. Loki's mastery of illusion and shape-shifting makes him a uniquely challenging opponent who can attack heroes through deception and manipulation as effectively as through direct confrontation. His schemes often involve turning allies against each other or exploiting existing tensions within heroic teams, reflecting his understanding that psychological warfare can be more effective than physical violence. The visual presentation of Loki has evolved significantly since his initial appearance, but his essential characteristics, the combination of regal bearing with underlying instability, the suggestion of hidden knowledge and secret plans, have remained constant. His distinctive horned helmet and green and gold color scheme create an immediately recognizable silhouette, while suggesting both his divine nature and his connection to classical depictions of devils and demons. Galactus represents Marvel's most ambitious attempt to create a villain who operates beyond conventional moral categories. As the devourer of worlds, Galactus poses threats on a cosmic scale that dwarf the concerns of individual planets or civilizations. Yet his actions are motivated not by evil intent, but by biological necessity. He consumes the life energy of planets not out of cruelty or ambition, but because his survival requires it, making him a force of nature rather than a traditional antagonist. The creation of Galactus allowed Stan Lee and Jack Kirby to explore philosophical questions about the nature of morality in a universe where different species and civilizations might have incompatible survival needs. Galactus's indifference to the suffering his feeding causes reflects not callousness, but a perspective so vast that individual lives become statistically insignificant. This cosmic viewpoint challenges readers to consider whether human moral systems remain valid when applied to entities whose existence operates on geological or astronomical timescales. The visual design of Galactus emphasized his inhuman nature while maintaining enough recognizable elements to allow readers to relate to him as a character. His massive size and distinctive armor create an imposing presence, while his humanoid form suggests intelligence and purpose rather than mindless destructive force. The elaborate technology he employs to locate and consume suitable planets provides visual spectacle, while reinforcing his role as a cosmic phenomenon rather than a planetary-scale threat. The Silver Surfer's role as Galactus's herald adds moral complexity to stories involving the World Devourer by providing a character who serves him reluctantly and suffers genuine anguish over the consequences of his actions. Norinrad's sacrifice of his home planet Zenla to save it from Galactus, and his subsequent enslavement as the Silver Surfer, creates a tragic figure whose nobility is demonstrated through his willingness to bear cosmic responsibility for the survival of his people. The Red Skull represents Marvel's attempt to create a villain who embodies pure ideological evil without the moral ambiguity that characterizes many of their other major antagonists. As the premier Nazi villain in the Marvel Universe, the Red Skull serves as a reminder of humanity's capacity for organized evil and systematic oppression. His ongoing survival and continued activities provide a connection between the historical crimes of fascism and contemporary threats to freedom and democracy. Johann Schmidt's transformation into the Red Skull was the result of deliberate choice rather than accident or external manipulation. His embrace of Nazi ideology and his willingness to commit atrocities in service of that belief system make him irredeemably evil in ways that allow heroes to oppose him without moral reservation. This clarity of opposition provides opportunities for straightforward adventure stories while maintaining thematic depth through exploration of how evil ideologies persist and adapt to changing circumstances. The visual impact of the Red Skull's appearance serves both practical and symbolic functions within Marvel storytelling. His literal skull face creates an immediately recognizable and disturbing image that works effectively on comic book covers and in action sequences, while symbolically representing the death and destruction that inevitably follow fascist movements. Thanos represents the ultimate evolution of Marvel's approach to cosmic villainy, combining the philosophical complexity of Galactus with the personal motivations of more traditionally conceived antagonists. His obsession with death, both as an abstract concept and as a personified entity within the Marvel Universe, drives actions that are simultaneously logical within his worldview and completely mad from any external perspective. The Mad Titan's belief that the universe would be better served by eliminating half of all life reflects a twisted form of altruism that makes him more dangerous than villains motivated by simple self-interest. Thanos genuinely believes that his actions will benefit the cosmos by reducing competition for resources and eliminating the suffering that comes from overpopulation and resource scarcity. This philosophical framework allows him to commit genocide while maintaining his self-image as a savior rather than a destroyer. Thanos' pursuit of ultimate power through the acquisition of cosmic artifacts like the Infinity Gems provides Marvel with opportunities to explore themes about the relationship between power and responsibility on the largest possible scale. His temporary success in achieving godlike abilities serves as a cautionary tale about what happens when unlimited power falls into the hands of someone whose moral vision is fundamentally flawed. Wilson Fisk, the kingpin of crime, represents Marvel's most successful attempt to create a street-level villain whose menace derives from realistic criminal methods rather than fantastic powers or cosmic threats. As the head of a vast criminal organization, Fisk wields influence through corruption, intimidation, and economic manipulation, making him a threat that heroes cannot simply punch into submission. The Kingpin's massive physical presence and his surprising agility and fighting skills provide him with the ability to hold his own in direct confrontations with superheroes, but his real power lies in his understanding of how modern society actually operates. His criminal empire extends into legitimate business, political corruption, and social institutions, making him nearly impossible to defeat through conventional law enforcement methods. Fisk's relationship with his wife Vanessa adds humanizing elements to his character that complicate simple moral judgments about his actions. His genuine love for his family and his desire to provide them with security and status suggest that his criminal activities are motivated by recognizable human emotions rather than pure evil or psychological pathology. Otto Octavius's transformation into Dr. Octopus represents Marvel's exploration of how scientific brilliance can be corrupted by obsession and the pursuit of knowledge without regard for ethical constraints. The mechanical arms that give him his distinctive abilities and appearance were originally designed as research tools, but the accident that fused them to his body also altered his personality in ways that eliminated his moral inhibitions and enhanced his megalomania. Dr. Octopus's intellectual rivalry with Spider-Man creates conflicts that operate on multiple levels simultaneously. Their battles are simultaneously physical confrontations between enhanced individuals and intellectual competitions between different approaches to scientific problem-solving. Otto's superior education and research experience are balanced against Peter's youth, intuition, and moral clarity, creating dramatic tension that extends beyond simple combat scenarios. The evolution of Marvel's villains from simple obstacles to complex characters reflects broader changes in American culture and entertainment during the 1960s and 70s. As audiences became more sophisticated and skeptical of authority, they demanded antagonists whose motivations made psychological sense and whose methods reflected recognizable aspects of real-world power structures and social problems. The influence of these villain creations extended far beyond their original comic book appearances to shape how antagonists were portrayed in all forms of popular entertainment. Their combination of spectacular abilities with psychologically realistic motivations provided templates that continue to influence character development in films, television, novels, and other media. The lasting appeal of Marvel's greatest villains lies not in their power to threaten heroes, but in their ability to illuminate different aspects of heroic character through opposition and conflict. Each major Marvel villain serves as a dark mirror that reflects potential paths that heroes might have taken under different circumstances, making their battles as much about internal moral choices as external physical confrontations. This approach to villain creation established Marvel as a company willing to explore the darker aspects of human nature, while maintaining hope that individuals could choose to use their abilities for constructive rather than destructive purposes. The transformation of Marvel Comics from a struggling comic book publisher into the foundation for the world's most successful entertainment franchise represents one of the most remarkable examples of creative vision meeting strategic business planning in modern history. The Marvel Cinematic Universe that began with Iron Man in 2008 was not the result of accident or luck, but the culmination of years of careful planning, calculated risks, and an unwavering belief that audiences would embrace interconnected storytelling on a scale that had never been attempted in cinema. The architect of this unprecedented experiment was Kevin Feige, a man whose deep understanding of both comic book mythology and film production would prove essential to translating Marvel's decades of character development into successful motion pictures. Feige's journey to becoming the head of Marvel Studios began in the 1990s when he worked as an assistant to producer Lauren Schuler Donner on the X-Men films, where he gained first-hand experience in the challenges of adapting comic book properties for mainstream audiences. During his early years in Hollywood, Feige observed how previous attempts to create comic book movies had often failed because filmmakers either treated the source material with embarrassment or focused so heavily on spectacular action that they neglected the character development that made the comics compelling. The Batman films of the 1990s had demonstrated both the potential and the pitfalls of superhero cinema. Tim Burton's Gothic approach had been commercially successful but divisively stylized, while Joel Schumacher's campy interpretation had nearly killed the franchise entirely. The X-Men films that Feige worked on during the early 2000s provided valuable lessons about adapting Marvel properties for cinema. Director Bryan Singer's approach emphasized the characters' humanity and the real-world implications of their abilities, proving that audiences could accept fantastic concepts if they were grounded in recognizable emotions and social situations. The success of these films demonstrated that Marvel characters could work on screen, but they also revealed the limitations of licensing individual properties to different studios with different creative visions. Marvel's decision to create their own film studio was born from frustration with this fragmented approach to their intellectual property. For decades, Marvel had been selling film rights to their characters to various studios, resulting in movies that often bore little resemblance to their comic book counterparts and generated revenue that flowed primarily to the licensees rather than to Marvel itself. Characters like Spider-Man, X-Men, and Fantastic Four were being developed by different companies with no coordination or shared vision. The formation of Marvel Studios in 2005 represented a radical gamble for a company that had emerged from bankruptcy less than a decade earlier. Rather than continuing to license their characters to established studios, Marvel decided to finance and produce their own films, retaining creative control while assuming all the financial risk. This decision required them to secure funding from Wall Street investors who had no experience in entertainment production and little understanding of comic book properties. The choice of Iron Man as the first character to launch the Marvel Cinematic Universe was both strategic and pragmatic. Unlike Spider-Man or X-Men, whose film rights belonged to other studios, Iron Man was available for Marvel to use. More importantly, Tony Stark represented everything that Marvel wanted their cinematic universe to embody: technological sophistication, moral complexity, and contemporary relevance that could appeal to adult audiences. while maintaining the spectacular action that comic book movies required. The casting of Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark proved to be one of the most inspired decisions in modern entertainment history, though it was considered highly risky at the time. Downey's career had been derailed by substance abuse problems during the 1990s, and many studio executives considered him uninsurable for major film productions. However, director Jon Favreau and Kevin Feige recognized that Downey's personal experiences with addiction and redemption perfectly paralleled Tony Stark's journey from weapons manufacturer to armored hero. Downey brought to the role a combination of charisma, intelligence, and vulnerability that made Tony Stark immediately compelling to audiences who might otherwise have found the character's wealth and arrogance off-putting. His improvisational skills allowed him to deliver dialogue that felt spontaneous and naturalistic, rather than stilted or overly scripted, establishing a tone for Marvel films that balanced humor with genuine emotional stakes. The production of Iron Man faced numerous challenges that could have derailed the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe before it began. The script underwent constant revisions throughout filming, with major story elements being adjusted based on what was working during production and what wasn't. The film's budget, while modest by blockbuster standards, represented a significant financial risk for Marvel Studios, and the company's future depended entirely on the movie's commercial success. The decision to reveal Tony Stark's secret identity at the end of the film violated one of the fundamental conventions of superhero storytelling, where secret identities were considered essential for maintaining dramatic tension and protecting supporting characters from retaliation. This bold choice reflected Marvel's commitment to creating a cinematic universe that operated according to different rules than traditional comic book adaptations, emphasizing transparency and accountability over hidden identities and private heroism. The post-credits scene featuring Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury delivering the line about the Avenger Initiative represented the most audacious gamble in the entire Marvel experiment. This brief sequence promised audiences that Iron Man was just the beginning of something much larger, a shared universe where multiple heroes would eventually team up for adventures too big for any single character to handle. At the time, this promise seemed almost impossibly ambitious, requiring Marvel to successfully launch several more franchise characters and somehow bring them together in a coherent narrative. The success of Iron Man at the box office and with critics provided Marvel Studios with the credibility and financial resources necessary to continue their experiment in shared universe storytelling. The film grossed over $500 million worldwide and received overwhelmingly positive reviews, proving that audiences were hungry for superhero stories that treated their characters with respect and intelligence. However, the success of Iron Man also created new pressures and expectations that would influence every subsequent Marvel film. Audiences and critics began looking for connections between movies, speculating about how individual character arcs would eventually intersect, and demanding that each new release advance the larger narrative while still working as a standalone story. This balancing act between individual character development and universe building would become one of the defining challenges of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The development of the Incredible Hulk, which began production shortly after Iron Man, demonstrated both the potential and the difficulties of Marvel's shared universe approach. The film was designed to fit into the same reality as Iron Man, while telling a complete story about Bruce Banner's struggle with his monstrous alter ego. However, the movie's darker tone and more troubled production process resulted in a film that felt somewhat disconnected from the lighter, more optimistic approach that had made Iron Man successful. The recasting of the Hulk role, with Mark Ruffalo replacing Edward Norton, illustrated Marvel's willingness to make difficult decisions to maintain the creative coherence of their cinematic universe. Norton's approach to the character emphasized the psychological horror of Banner's condition, while Marvel's vision required a version of the Hulk who could eventually function as part of a team dynamic. This change demonstrated that Marvel Studios would prioritize their long-term narrative goals over individual actor preferences or creative differences. Iron Man 2 faced the challenge of building upon its predecessor's success while advancing the larger Marvel narrative and introducing new characters who would become important in future films. The movie struggled to balance Tony Stark's personal journey with the need to establish Black Widow, further develop Nick Fury, and set up plot elements that would pay off in later movies. While commercially successful, the film received more mixed reviews than the original, highlighting the difficulties inherent in creating movies that serve multiple narrative functions simultaneously. The introduction of Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow in Iron Man 2 demonstrated Marvel's commitment to developing supporting characters who could eventually carry their own storylines. Natasha Romanoff's mysterious background and complex moral history provided opportunities for character development that would continue across multiple films, while her combat skills and espionage expertise added new dimensions to the types of conflicts that Marvel heroes could face. Thor presented unique challenges for Marvel Studios, requiring them to translate the mythological elements of the character into a science fiction framework that could coexist with the more technologically grounded Iron Man films. The decision to present Asgardian magic as advanced science that appears supernatural only from a less sophisticated perspective allowed Marvel to maintain narrative consistency while embracing the cosmic scope that would eventually encompass their entire cinematic universe. Chris Hemsworth's casting as Thor required him to embody both the character's divine arrogance and his capacity for growth and humility. The fish-out-of-water elements of Thor's banishment to Earth provided opportunities for both comedy and character development, while his relationship with Jane Foster grounded his cosmic concerns in recognizable human emotions. Kenneth Branagh's Shakespearean approach to directing the film emphasized the family drama between Thor, Loki, and Odin, creating emotional stakes that elevated the spectacular action sequences. Tom Hiddleston's portrayal of Loki established one of the most complex and compelling villains in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, a character whose motivations were understandable even when his methods were unforgivable. The sibling rivalry between Thor and Loki provided personal stakes that would drive multiple films, while Loki's mastery of illusion and manipulation made him a unique threat who could not be defeated through simple physical confrontation. Captain America. The first Avenger faced the challenge of making a character whose moral certainty and patriotic symbolism could have seemed outdated or jingoistic feel relevant and inspiring to contemporary audiences. Chris Evans's performance emphasized Steve Rogers' fundamental decency and his commitment to protecting innocent people regardless of their nationality or circumstances, creating a version of American heroism that could appeal to international audiences while maintaining the character's essential values. The period setting of Captain America allowed Marvel to explore the character's origins during World War II, while establishing connections to the present day through the Cosmic Cube and Howard Stark's advanced technology. The film's ending, with Steve Rogers awakening in the modern world after decades of suspended animation, provided emotional weight to his character while setting up his role in the upcoming Avengers film. The decision to bring Joss Whedon on board to write and direct The Avengers represented Marvel's recognition that assembling multiple franchise characters in a single film would require a filmmaker with specific expertise in ensemble, storytelling, and character dynamics. Whedon's background in television, particularly his work on shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Firefly, had given him extensive experience in developing ongoing relationships between multiple characters with distinct personalities and abilities. The production of the Avengers required unprecedented coordination between multiple creative teams, ongoing franchise commitments, and actor schedules that had never been designed to accommodate such a massive collaborative project. The film needed to provide satisfying character arcs for 6 different heroes while telling a complete story that would justify bringing them together and establish their ongoing relationships for future installments. The success of the Avengers exceeded even Marvel's most optimistic projections, grossing over $1.5 billion worldwide and receiving critical acclaim that validated their shared universe experiment. The film proved that audiences would embrace interconnected storytelling on a scale that had never been attempted, opening the door for increasingly ambitious projects that would expand the Marvel Cinematic Universe across multiple phases of development. The cultural impact of the early Marvel Cinematic Universe films extended far beyond their commercial success to influence how Hollywood approached franchise development, shared universe creation, and the adaptation of existing intellectual property. Other studios began attempting to replicate Marvel's success with their own properties, while Marvel itself began planning phases of development that would span decades and encompass dozens of films across multiple genres and formats. The establishment of Marvel Studios as an independent creative entity within the larger Disney Corporation, following the acquisition in 2009, provided the company with unprecedented resources and global distribution capabilities while maintaining the creative autonomy that had made their initial success possible. This combination of creative freedom and corporate support would prove essential for the increasingly ambitious projects that would define the next phases of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The foundation that was established during these early years of the Marvel Cinematic Universe created a template for shared universe storytelling that continues to influence entertainment production across all media. The careful balance between individual character development and larger narrative coordination, the emphasis on practical effects combined with cutting-edge digital technology, and the commitment to treating source material with respect while adapting it for new audiences established principles that would guide Marvel's creative decisions for years to come. The transformation of Marvel from a comic book publisher on the verge of bankruptcy to the architect of the world's most successful entertainment franchise demonstrates the power of creative vision combined with strategic planning and willingness to take calculated risks. The success of the Marvel Cinematic Universe proved that audiences were hungry for sophisticated, interconnected storytelling that respected both the intelligence of viewers and the complexity of the source material, establishing a new paradigm for how entertainment companies could develop and maintain long-term relationships with their audiences across multiple platforms and formats. The casting and character development that defined the Marvel Cinematic Universe represents one of the most successful examples of translating beloved literary characters into cinematic form while maintaining their essential qualities and expanding their appeal to global audiences. The actors who embodied these iconic heroes didn't simply portray existing characters. They collaborated with writers, directors, and producers to create definitive interpretations that honor decades of comic book storytelling, while establishing new templates for how these figures would be understood by future generations. The transformation of Chris Evans from the Human Torch to Captain America illustrates the complexity involved in finding the perfect actor for an iconic role. Evans had already established himself in the superhero genre through his portrayal of Johnny Storm in the Fantastic Four films. But his interpretation of Steve Rogers required him to embody completely different qualities: restraint instead of impulsiveness, quiet leadership instead of attention-seeking behavior, moral certainty instead of youthful recklessness. Evans initially hesitated to accept the Captain America role, not because he doubted his ability to portray the character, but because he understood the long-term commitment that would be required. The multi-picture contract that Marvel demanded would potentially limit his ability to pursue other creative projects for nearly a decade, transforming him from an actor who played various roles into someone who would be permanently identified with a single character. The decision to cast Evans proved inspired because his natural charisma and everyman appeal made Steve Rogers' moral perfection feel authentic rather than sanctimonious. Evans understood that Captain America's greatest strength was not his enhanced physical abilities, but his unwavering commitment to protecting innocent people, and he portrayed this dedication with a sincerity that made audiences believe in the possibility of genuine heroism, even in morally complex situations. The physical transformation that Evans underwent to portray Captain America involved not just building muscle mass, but learning to move and carry himself like someone who had been transformed from a 90-pound weakling into a perfect physical specimen. The contrast between pre-serum Steve Rogers and the fully enhanced Captain America had to be conveyed through body language and posture as much as through special effects and prosthetics. Evans's portrayal of Captain America evolved significantly over the course of multiple films, reflecting both the character's adjustment to the modern world and the actor's growing comfort with the role. The Steve Rogers of the first Avenger was still learning to be a leader, while the Captain America of the Winter Soldier had become a seasoned operative, comfortable with making difficult tactical decisions. By Civil War, Evans was portraying a character whose faith in institutions had been shaken, but whose commitment to his principles remained uncompromised. Chris Hemsworth faced different but equally challenging demands in bringing Thor to life on screen. The character required an actor who could convincingly portray both divine arrogance and the capacity for growth and humility, someone who could deliver Shakespearean dialogue without seeming pretentious, while also handling physical comedy and romantic scenes with equal effectiveness. Hemsworth's background in Australian soap opera had given him experience with melodramatic dialogue and heightened emotional situations, but Thor required him to find the balance between the character's mythological grandeur and his essential humanity. The fish-out-of-water elements of Thor's exile to Earth provided opportunities for both physical comedy and character development, allowing Hemsworth to show the character's confusion and wonder at encountering a world so different from Asgard. The evolution of Thor's character across multiple films reflected both Hemsworth's growing confidence as an actor and Marvel's willingness to adjust their approach based on what was working and what wasn't. The relatively serious tone of the first Thor film gave way to the cosmic adventure of the Dark World, which in turn evolved into the comedic approach of Ragnarok. Hemsworth's natural gift for comedy, which had been underutilized in earlier films, became central to the character's appeal in later appearances. The relationship between Thor and Loki, portrayed by Tom Hiddleston, became one of the most emotionally complex dynamics in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Hiddleston's portrayal of Loki emphasized the character's intelligence and wounded pride rather than simple evil, creating a villain whose motivations were understandable even when his methods were unforgivable. The sibling rivalry between Thor and Loki provided emotional stakes that elevated their conflicts beyond simple good versus evil narratives. Star-Lord's introduction through Chris Pratt's casting in Guardians of the Galaxy represented Marvel's willingness to take risks on relatively unknown properties and actors who might not fit traditional superhero archetypes. Pratt's background in comedy, particularly his work on Parks and Recreation, had established him as a likable performer, but not necessarily someone who could carry a major action franchise. The transformation that Pratt underwent for the role, both physically and in terms of screen presence, demonstrated his commitment to expanding his range as an actor while maintaining the humor and relatability that had made him popular on television. Peter Quill's character required someone who could balance roguish charm with genuine emotional vulnerability, particularly in scenes dealing with his complicated relationship with his celestial father. Pratt's chemistry with the ensemble cast of Guardians of the Galaxy, including Zoe Saldana as Gamora, and the voice performances of Bradley Cooper and Vin Diesel as Rocket and Groot, created a family dynamic that felt authentic despite the fantastic circumstances. The success of these relationships proved that Marvel's formula could work even with characters who had no connection to Earth or traditional superhero archetypes. Scarlett Johansson's development of Black Widow across multiple films showcased Marvel's approach to character evolution over extended narrative arcs. Introduced as a mysterious operative with questionable loyalties in Iron Man 2, Natasha Romanoff gradually revealed layers of complexity and moral conviction that transformed her from a supporting character into one of the emotional centers of the Avengers team. Johansson's portrayal emphasized Black Widow's intelligence and tactical expertise rather than simply her combat skills, showing how someone without superpowers could hold her own among gods and monsters through preparation, adaptability, and sheer determination. Her performance grounded the more fantastic elements of the Marvel Cinematic Universe in recognizable human emotions and relationships. The evolution of Black Widow's role within the team dynamic reflected changing attitudes about female characters in action films, and Marvel's growing understanding of how to balance ensemble storytelling with individual character development. Johansson's input into the character's development, particularly regarding her backstory and motivations, helped create a more fully realized version of Black Widow than had initially been envisioned. Tom Holland's casting as Spider-Man represented Marvel's determination to find an actor who could authentically portray a teenage superhero, while also fitting into the established Marvel Cinematic Universe. Holland's youth, he was 19 when cast, allowed him to bring genuine adolescent energy to Peter Parker, while his gymnastics background enabled him to perform many of his own stunts and movement sequences. The decision to reintroduce Spider-Man into the Marvel Cinematic Universe after 2 previous film franchises required careful handling to avoid repeating storylines that audiences had already seen. Holland's version of Peter Parker was younger and more inexperienced than previous interpretations, allowing the films to explore his development as both a hero and a person within the context of the larger Marvel universe. Holland's natural enthusiasm for the character and his genuine excitement about working with the established Marvel actors helped create authentic mentorship dynamics, particularly with Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark. The relationship between Peter Parker and Tony Stark became one of the most emotionally significant connections in the later Marvel films, providing both characters with opportunities for growth and development. The challenge of integrating Spider-Man into the Marvel Cinematic Universe while maintaining his essential character traits required Holland to balance the character's traditional wisecracking personality with the more grounded tone that had been established in other Marvel films. His performance managed to honor the comic book version of Spider-Man while creating something that felt fresh and contemporary. Chadwick Boseman's portrayal of Black Panther represented one of the most culturally significant casting decisions in Marvel history, introducing the first major black superhero to lead a Marvel film, while creating a character who could serve as both an individual hero and a symbol of African excellence and technological advancement. Boseman's preparation for the role involved extensive research into African cultures, languages, and history, ensuring that T'Challa's character would be grounded in authentic cultural references rather than generic Hollywood representations of African identity. His development of T'Challa's accent and bearing drew from various African linguistic traditions while creating something distinctive for the character. The performance balanced T'Challa's roles as king, warrior, and diplomat, showing how someone could embody traditional leadership values while embracing technological advancement and global responsibility. Boseman's portrayal emphasized the character's intelligence and strategic thinking as much as his physical prowess, creating a hero who succeeded through preparation and wisdom rather than simply superior strength. The cultural impact of Boseman's Black Panther extended far beyond entertainment to influence discussions about representation, African culture, and the possibilities for positive depictions of Black characters in mainstream media. His commitment to the role and his understanding of its significance helped create a character who could inspire audiences while telling compelling stories about power, responsibility, and cultural identity. Benedict Cumberbatch's casting as Doctor Strange required an actor who could make the mystical elements of the Marvel Cinematic Universe feel as grounded and believable as its technological components. Cumberbatch's background in playing highly intelligent characters, particularly Sherlock Holmes, provided a foundation for portraying Stephen Strange's analytical mind and his approach to mastering the mystic arts through study and practice. The character's journey from arrogant surgeon to mystical protector required Cumberbatch to show both Strange's fall from professional grace and his gradual acceptance of responsibilities that extended far beyond his personal concerns. The physical demands of the role, including the intricate hand movements required for spellcasting, added another layer of complexity to the performance. Cumberbatch's portrayal emphasized Doctor Strange's intellectual approach to magic, treating the mystic arts as another form of advanced science that operated according to consistent principles. This interpretation helped integrate magical elements into the Marvel Cinematic Universe without contradicting the more technology-based explanations that had been established in earlier films. Paul Rudd's casting as Ant-Man demonstrated Marvel's confidence in comedic actors and their ability to bring humor to superhero stories without undermining their dramatic impact. Rudd's everyman appeal made Scott Lang's transformation into a shrinking superhero feel more relatable and accessible than it might have with a more traditionally heroic actor. The decision to focus on Scott Lang, rather than the original Ant-Man, Hank Pym, allowed the film to explore themes of redemption and second chances, while maintaining connections to the larger Marvel universe through Pym's history with SHIELD and the founding of the Avengers. Rudd's chemistry with Michael Douglas, who played Hank Pym, created a mentor-student relationship that provided both comedy and genuine emotional stakes. Rudd's approach to the role emphasized Scott Lang's reluctant heroism and his motivation to become a better father to his daughter. This personal stakes approach grounded the fantastic elements of the character's abilities in recognizable human emotions and relationships, making Ant-Man's adventures feel relevant despite their often absurd circumstances. Brie Larson's casting as Captain Marvel represented Marvel's commitment to expanding the diversity of their lead characters while introducing one of their most powerful heroes. Larson's background in both independent drama and mainstream comedy provided her with the range necessary to portray both Carol Danvers' human struggles and her cosmic-level abilities. The challenge of introducing Captain Marvel into the established Marvel Cinematic Universe required careful handling of her immense power level and her absence from earlier conflicts. Larson's portrayal emphasized the character's military background and her determination to use her abilities to protect innocent people, creating a hero whose strength came from her convictions as much as her cosmic powers. The development of Captain Marvel's character required Larson to work closely with directors and writers to create a portrayal that would honor the character's comic book history while fitting into the established tone and style of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Her performance balanced Carol Danvers' confidence and determination with moments of vulnerability and uncertainty that made her feel human despite her extraordinary abilities. The success of these casting decisions demonstrates Marvel's sophisticated understanding of how to match actors with characters in ways that serve both individual performances and the larger narrative universe. Each actor brought their own interpretation and personality to their role, while maintaining consistency with the established Marvel approach to character development and storytelling. The chemistry between these actors, both in individual relationships and in ensemble scenes, became one of the defining characteristics of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The genuine friendships and professional relationships that developed among the cast members translated into authentic on-screen dynamics that made audiences invest emotionally in the characters' relationships and conflicts. The evolution of these performances across multiple films showcased the benefits of Marvel's long-term approach to character development, allowing both actors and characters to grow and change in response to new challenges and experiences. This approach created a sense of genuine progression and development that distinguished the Marvel Cinematic Universe from other franchise approaches that simply repeated successful formulas without allowing for change or growth. The cultural impact of these casting choices extended far beyond their individual films to influence how superhero characters are portrayed across all media and how audiences understand the relationship between actors and the iconic characters they portray. The success of these performances established new standards for superhero casting and character development that continue to influence entertainment production across all genres and formats. The expansion of Marvel's storytelling into the streaming television landscape represents one of the most ambitious experiments in narrative continuity ever attempted, transforming the way audiences consume superhero entertainment, while establishing new possibilities for character development and thematic exploration. The launch of Disney Plus in November 2019 provided Marvel Studios with an unprecedented opportunity to create content that could bridge the gap between theatrical releases while exploring characters and storylines that might not support feature-length films on their own. The decision to invest heavily in streaming content reflected Marvel's understanding that modern audiences consume entertainment across multiple platforms and formats, expecting seamless integration between different types of media experiences. The Disney Plus strategy allowed Marvel to expand their universe in ways that would have been impossible through theatrical releases alone, providing opportunities for more intimate character studies, experimental storytelling techniques, and deeper exploration of the consequences of events depicted in the films. Kevin Feige's approach to Marvel's streaming expansion emphasized the importance of maintaining the same production values and narrative continuity that had made the theatrical films successful. Rather than treating television content as secondary to film releases, Marvel positioned their Disney Plus series as essential components of the larger Marvel Cinematic Universe, with events and character developments that would have direct impact on future theatrical releases. WandaVision emerged as the flagship series for Marvel's streaming initiative, representing their most experimental and ambitious approach to superhero storytelling since the inception of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The series challenged audience expectations by presenting familiar characters in completely unfamiliar contexts, using the format of classic television sitcoms to explore themes of grief, trauma, and the lengths to which people will go to avoid confronting painful realities. Elizabeth Olsen's portrayal of Wanda Maximoff in WandaVision required her to master multiple different acting styles, corresponding to different eras of television comedy, from the broad physical humor of 1950s sitcoms to the more naturalistic approach of modern family comedies. Her performance had to work simultaneously as loving homage to television history and as genuine character development that advanced Wanda's emotional journey from the previous films. The creative team behind WandaVision, led by showrunner Jack Schaefer, understood that the series' unusual format would only succeed if the underlying emotional story remained authentic and compelling. The mystery of why Wanda had created the Westview anomaly provided narrative momentum, but the series' true strength lay in its exploration of how people process loss and the ways in which denial can become a form of self-imprisonment. Paul Bettany's dual role as both the idealized sitcom version of Vision and the reconstituted White Vision allowed the series to examine questions about identity, consciousness, and the nature of love through the lens of artificial intelligence and resurrection. The philosophical discussions between these two versions of the same character provided some of the series' most intellectually challenging moments, while remaining grounded in recognizable emotional concerns. The supporting cast of WandaVision, including Kathryn Hahn as Agatha Harkness and Teyonah Parris as Monica Rambeau, demonstrated Marvel's commitment to introducing new characters through their streaming content, while maintaining connections to the larger cinematic universe. Agatha's revelation as a centuries-old witch provided exposition about Wanda's true nature as the Scarlet Witch, while Monica's developing powers set up her role in future cosmic storylines. The visual and production design of WandaVision represented some of the most innovative work in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, requiring the creation of authentic-looking recreations of television shows from multiple decades while gradually revealing the darker reality underlying the sitcom facade. The transition between different visual styles and aspect ratios helped audiences understand Wanda's psychological journey while providing commentary on how American culture and values had evolved over the decades. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier took a completely different approach to Marvel's streaming expansion, focusing on real-world political and social issues through the lens of superhero adventure. The series examined the legacy of Captain America's shield and what it meant for a black man to inherit a symbol so closely associated with American idealism and historical mythology. Anthony Mackie's development of Sam Wilson's character from supporting player to leading hero required him to explore the weight of responsibility that comes with taking on an iconic mantle. The series addressed questions about race, patriotism, and the gap between American ideals and American realities in ways that would have been difficult to accomplish within the runtime constraints of a theatrical film. Sebastian Stan's continued portrayal of Bucky Barnes allowed the series to explore themes of redemption and the long-term psychological consequences of trauma and mind control. The relationship between Sam and Bucky evolved from mutual suspicion and resentment to genuine partnership and friendship, providing character development that enriched both individuals while establishing the foundation for future adventures. The introduction of John Walker as the government-appointed replacement Captain America, portrayed by Wyatt Russell, created dramatic tension, while exploring how the same symbol can be interpreted and used in very different ways by different individuals. Walker's eventual transformation into U.S. agent demonstrated Marvel's willingness to show how good intentions can be corrupted by pressure, trauma, and inadequate preparation for overwhelming responsibility. The series also introduced Isaiah Bradley, the forgotten black super soldier, whose experiences with the same serum that created Captain America revealed the hidden history of American military experimentation and the systematic erasure of black contributions to national security. Carl Lumbly's powerful performance provided historical context that complicated simple narratives about American heroism while honoring the real-world experiences of black soldiers and veterans. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier's exploration of the Flag Smashers, a group seeking to return to the borderless world that existed during the blip, raised complex questions about nationalism, globalism, and the unintended consequences of the Avengers' actions. The series suggested that heroic interventions, no matter how well-intentioned, inevitably create new problems that require ongoing attention and responsibility. Loki represented Marvel's most direct exploration of the multiverse concept and the implications of branching timelines for the established Marvel Cinematic Universe. Tom Hiddleston's return to his signature role allowed the series to examine the character from entirely new angles while introducing concepts that would become central to the next phase of Marvel's theatrical releases. The Time Variance Authority, introduced as the organization responsible for maintaining the sacred timeline, provided a framework for exploring questions about free will, determinism, and the nature of identity across multiple realities. The revelation that the TVA was itself a creation designed to prevent multiversal war added layers of complexity to what initially appeared to be a straightforward story about timeline maintenance. The relationship between Loki and Sylvie, his female variant from another timeline, allowed the series to explore themes of self-love, personal growth, and the possibility of redemption through relationships with others who understand your experiences. Sofia DiMartino's portrayal of Sylvie created a character who was recognizably a version of Loki while being distinctly different in motivations and methods. The introduction of He Who Remains, portrayed by Jonathan Majors, established the foundation for future conflicts involving Kang the Conqueror and the multiversal wars that would define the next phase of Marvel storytelling. The character's explanation of his role in preventing multiversal conflict, while also maintaining oppressive control over all timelines, raised questions about whether stability was worth the cost of freedom. Owen Wilson's performance as Mobius provided the series with a grounding presence who could serve as both ally and interrogator for Loki's journey of self-discovery. The friendship that developed between these characters demonstrated Loki's capacity for genuine connection and growth, while maintaining the wit and intelligence that had made the character appealing in previous appearances. What If provided Marvel with the opportunity to explore alternate possibilities for their established characters while experimenting with animation as a storytelling medium. The anthology format allowed individual episodes to take creative risks that might not have been possible in live-action productions, while maintaining connections to the larger Marvel multiverse through the Watcher's narration. Jeffrey Wright's portrayal of the Watcher provided a unifying voice for the series while establishing the character as an important figure in Marvel's cosmic hierarchy. The Watcher's eventual intervention in the final episodes demonstrated that even cosmic entities dedicated to non-interference could be moved to action by sufficiently dire circumstances. The series allowed actors from the live-action films to explore different aspects of their characters through voice performances, with many returning to reprise their roles in animated form. This continuity helped maintain the connection between the animated series and the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, while allowing for storylines that would have been impossible to produce in live action. Hawkeye provided a more intimate and ground-level approach to Marvel storytelling, focusing on Clint Barton's attempts to enjoy a quiet Christmas with his family, while dealing with consequences from his time as the vigilante Ronin during the blip years. The series demonstrated that compelling superhero stories could be told on a smaller scale while still maintaining connections to the larger Marvel universe. Haley Steinfeld's introduction as Kate Bishop created a protege relationship that allowed the series to explore themes of mentorship, legacy, and the different ways that heroism can manifest across generations. Her enthusiasm for archery and her admiration for Hawkeye provided humor and heart, while setting up her continued role in future Marvel productions. The inclusion of characters from the Netflix Daredevil series, particularly Vincent D'Onofrio's return as Kingpin and the debut of Alaqua Cox as Echo, demonstrated Marvel's willingness to incorporate elements from previous Marvel television productions, while maintaining their own creative vision for how these characters would function within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Moon Knight represented Marvel's most psychologically complex streaming series, exploring themes of mental illness, religious faith, and ancient mythology through the lens of superhero adventure. Oscar Isaac's multiple performances as different aspects of Mark Spector's personality created a character study that was unlike anything else in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The series' exploration of dissociative identity disorder required careful handling to avoid stigmatizing portrayals while still creating compelling drama from Mark's psychological struggles. The relationship between Mark Spector and Stephen Grant provided opportunities for both comedy and pathos, while exploring how trauma can fragment identity and how healing requires integration rather than suppression. The Egyptian mythology that provided the foundation for Moon Knight's powers allowed the series to explore different cultural and religious traditions while expanding the mystical corner of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The conflict between different Egyptian gods provided spectacle, while also examining questions about faith, justice, and the responsibilities that come with serving higher powers. Ms. Marvel brought a distinctly different perspective to Marvel's streaming content through its focus on a teenage Pakistani-American character, navigating cultural identity, family expectations, and superhero responsibilities. Iman Vellani's portrayal of Kamala Khan emphasized the character's enthusiasm and optimism while exploring the challenges of growing up as a member of multiple communities with sometimes conflicting values. The series' exploration of Pakistani and South Asian culture provided representation that had been largely absent from mainstream superhero media, while creating storylines that were accessible to audiences unfamiliar with these cultural traditions. The family dynamics depicted in the series emphasized the importance of community and intergenerational relationships in ways that distinguished it from more individualistic superhero narratives. The development of Kamala's powers and her discovery of her connection to cosmic forces provided opportunities for spectacular action sequences, while maintaining the series' focus on character development and cultural identity. The balance between superhero adventure and coming-of-age story created a unique entry point for younger audiences while still appealing to longtime Marvel fans. She-Hulk, attorney at law, represented Marvel's most direct attempt at legal comedy within the superhero genre, using Jennifer Walters' career as a lawyer specializing in superhuman cases to explore the practical and legal implications of a world populated by enhanced individuals. Tatiana Maslany's performance balanced the character's professional competence with her adjustment to superhero life, while maintaining the fourth wall-breaking elements that had distinguished the character in comic book form. The series' exploration of how the legal system might adapt to the existence of superheroes provided opportunities for both comedy and social commentary, while expanding the everyday reality of the Marvel Cinematic Universe beyond the perspective of active heroes. The cases that Jennifer handled provided insights into how ordinary people might be affected by superhero activities and cosmic events. The integration of characters from previous Marvel productions, including the return of Tim Roth as Abomination and Charlie Cox as Daredevil, demonstrated the series' connections to the larger Marvel universe while maintaining its own distinct tone and approach to superhero storytelling. The success of Marvel's streaming expansion demonstrated the viability of interconnected storytelling across multiple formats and platforms, while proving that audiences would embrace more experimental and diverse approaches to superhero entertainment. The different tones, formats, and storytelling techniques employed across these series showed that the Marvel formula was flexible enough to accommodate a wide range of creative visions while maintaining narrative continuity and character consistency. The cultural impact of these streaming series extended beyond their individual merits to influence how other entertainment companies approached franchise development and cross-platform storytelling. The success of these productions validated Marvel's long-term approach to universe building while establishing new standards for production quality and narrative ambition in streaming television content. The foundation established by these streaming series created opportunities for future Marvel productions to explore characters and storylines that might not support theatrical releases while maintaining the production values and narrative sophistication that audiences had come to expect from Marvel. Content. This expansion of the Marvel Cinematic Universe across multiple platforms and formats ensured that the company could continue developing their properties in innovative ways, while meeting the evolving expectations of modern entertainment consumers. The culmination of the Marvel Cinematic Universe's first 3 phases in what became known as the Infinity Saga represents the most ambitious and emotionally complex storytelling achievement in modern entertainment history. This sweeping narrative arc, which began with subtle hints in the first Iron Man film, and concluded with the universe-altering events of Avengers Endgame, demonstrated that audiences would embrace interconnected storytelling on a scale that had never been attempted, while proving that commercial blockbuster entertainment could support genuine emotional depth and thematic sophistication. The foundation for the Infinity Saga was laid through years of careful planning and strategic storytelling choices that gradually introduced audiences to concepts that would have seemed impossibly ambitious if presented all at once. The Infinity Stones themselves were introduced gradually across multiple films, each one established as a powerful artifact in its own right, before their collective significance became apparent. This approach allowed Marvel to build audience understanding and investment in these cosmic MacGuffins, while maintaining the individual identity of each film in which they appeared. The Space Stone, first appearing as the Tesseract in Captain America, the first Avenger, provided the energy source for Hydra's advanced weapons during World War II, while establishing connections between Earth's history and cosmic forces that would become central to later storylines. Its reappearance in the Avengers as the portal-generating device that enabled Loki's invasion demonstrated how these artifacts could serve multiple narrative functions across different films and time periods. The Reality Stone's introduction through the ether in Thor. The Dark World expanded the scope of the Marvel Cinematic Universe to include concepts of universal destruction and rebirth, while the Power Stone in Guardians of the Galaxy provided the catalyst for that team's formation, while demonstrating the catastrophic potential that these artifacts possessed when wielded by individuals with destructive intentions. The Mind Stone's revelation as the source of Loki's scepter, and later as the core of Vision's consciousness, created direct connections between the cosmic mythology and the more intimate character relationships that provided the emotional foundation for the entire saga. The discovery that this stone had been influencing events since the first Avengers film retroactively added layers of meaning to previous storylines, while setting up the tragic inevitability of Vision's fate in the climactic battles to come. The Time Stone's presence in Doctor Strange established the mystical corner of the Marvel Universe, while introducing concepts of temporal manipulation that would become crucial to the resolution of the Infinity Saga. The Soul Stone's placement on Vormir and the sacrifice required to obtain it provided the most emotionally devastating moment in the entire saga, while demonstrating that even cosmic power came with moral costs that could not be avoided or circumvented. The development of Thanos as the central antagonist of the Infinity Saga required a decade of careful character building and philosophical development that transformed him from a briefly glimpsed cosmic threat into one of the most complex and compelling villains in cinematic history. Josh Brolin's performance, enhanced by cutting-edge motion capture technology, created a character who was simultaneously monstrous and sympathetic, whose motivations were comprehensible even when his methods were unforgivable. The philosophical framework that drove Thanos' actions, his belief that the universe's finite resources required the elimination of half of all life to prevent universal suffering and collapse, provided him with a moral justification that was internally consistent even though it was fundamentally flawed. This approach to villain creation allowed the Infinity Saga to explore complex themes about utilitarianism, environmental responsibility, and the dangers of implementing ideological solutions to complex problems without regard for individual rights or alternative approaches. Thanos' relationship with his adopted daughters, Gamora and Nebula, provided the emotional core for his character development, while demonstrating how even genuine affection could be corrupted by obsession and ideological certainty. The revelation that he was capable of love, as evidenced by his grief over Gamora's death, made him more rather than less disturbing, showing how personal feelings could coexist with genocidal actions in individuals who had convinced themselves that their goals justified any means. The Russo brothers' approach to directing Avengers, Infinity War and Endgame required them to balance the expectations and character arcs of more than 20 major characters, while maintaining narrative coherence and emotional authenticity across nearly 6 hours of total runtime. Their background in television, particularly their work on ensemble shows like Community, provided them with experience in managing multiple character relationships and ongoing storylines that proved essential for handling the complexity of the Infinity Saga's conclusion. The decision to structure Infinity War as essentially Thanos' story, following his quest to acquire the Infinity Stones while the heroes reacted to his actions, represented a bold narrative choice that subverted traditional expectations about protagonist and antagonist roles. This approach allowed the film to maintain forward momentum while providing adequate screen time for numerous characters, but it also meant that many beloved heroes had reduced roles in what was ostensibly their climactic adventure. The emotional impact of Infinity War's ending, with the apparent deaths of half of all life in the universe, including many beloved characters, represented an unprecedented moment in blockbuster entertainment, where audiences were forced to confront the possibility that their heroes had genuinely failed and that the consequences might be permanent. The image of Spider-Man dissolving in Tony Stark's arms became one of the most emotionally devastating moments in superhero cinema, demonstrating that the stakes of these cosmic conflicts extended beyond abstract universal concerns to include deeply personal relationships and individual losses. The 5-year time jump that opened Avengers Endgame allowed the filmmakers to explore the long-term psychological and social consequences of Thanos' victory, while providing opportunities for character development that would have been impossible within the constraints of a single continuous narrative. The depiction of how different characters responded to loss and failure, Tony Stark's retirement and family life, Steve Rogers' support group meetings, Thor's depression and isolation, Natasha Romanoff's desperate attempts to maintain global stability, provided emotional depth and realistic consequences for the traumatic events of the previous film. The discovery of quantum realm time travel as a potential solution to the snap created narrative opportunities, while establishing clear rules and limitations that prevented the mechanism from feeling like a simple reset button that negated the emotional impact of previous events. The requirement that the heroes travel to specific moments in their own past to acquire the Infinity Stones provided opportunities for reflection on their personal journeys while creating new dramatic situations and character interactions. The time heist sequences in Endgame functioned simultaneously as nostalgic callbacks to earlier films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and as opportunities for character development and closure. The return to the Battle of New York allowed the film to show how the original Avengers had grown and changed since their first assembly, while the journey to Asgard provided Thor with the opportunity to reconnect with his mother and gain perspective on his own development as a leader and a person. Tony Stark's interaction with his father Howard during the 1970s sequence provided emotional resolution for character relationships that had been developing since the first Iron Man film, while Steve Rogers' glimpse of Peggy Carter offered closure for his romantic storyline without undermining the growth he had experienced in the present day. These moments demonstrated that time travel in the Marvel Cinematic Universe was not just a plot device, but a mechanism for exploring how characters had been shaped by their past experiences. The final battle sequence in Endgame represented the culmination of 11 years of character relationships and ongoing storylines, bringing together heroes from across the Marvel Cinematic Universe for a conflict that felt genuinely earned through years of individual development and gradually escalating threats. The moment when Captain America proved worthy to wield Thor's hammer provided catharsis for character development that had been building since his introduction, while the arrival of the previously dusted heroes created emotional release that was proportionate to the grief and loss that had been established in the previous film. Tony Stark's ultimate sacrifice to defeat Thanos and save the universe provided a conclusion to his character arc that felt both surprising and inevitable, demonstrating how the selfish weapons manufacturer introduced in the first Iron Man film had evolved into someone willing to give his life for the greater good. Robert Downey Jr.'s performance in this final sequence balanced the character's typical wit and intelligence with genuine gravity and heroic determination, creating a moment that served as both spectacular action sequence and intimate character study. Steve Rogers' decision to remain in the past and live a full life with Peggy Carter provided a different but equally satisfying conclusion to his character arc, showing that heroism sometimes required the wisdom to know when to step aside and allow others to carry on the work of protecting the world. The passing of the Captain America mantle to Sam Wilson created opportunities for future storytelling while honoring the legacy of the character and the themes he had represented throughout the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The funeral sequence for Tony Stark brought together characters from across the Marvel Cinematic Universe in a way that celebrated not just the character's sacrifice, but the entire shared universe that had been built around his initial journey from selfish industrialist to selfless hero. The presence of characters ranging from the original Avengers to relatively recent additions like Shuri and Harley Quinn demonstrated the far-reaching impact that Tony's actions had on individuals throughout the Marvel universe. The technical achievement represented by the Infinity Saga extended far beyond individual special effects sequences to encompass innovations in digital character creation, large-scale action choreography, and the integration of practical and computer-generated elements. The motion capture performance that brought Thanos to life represented the culmination of decades of advancement in digital character technology, creating a villain who felt completely real and present despite being entirely computer-generated. The coordination required to maintain visual consistency across multiple films directed by different filmmakers, while allowing each individual movie to maintain its own aesthetic identity, represented unprecedented challenges in franchise filmmaking. The establishment of visual effects, standards, and character design continuity across dozens of production companies and hundreds of individual artists demonstrated new possibilities for collaborative, creative work on unprecedented scales. The emotional impact of the Infinity Saga extended far beyond its immediate entertainment value to influence how audiences understood long-form storytelling and emotional investment in fictional characters. The genuine grief that many viewers experienced at the deaths of beloved characters demonstrated that modern blockbuster entertainment could create emotional connections that were comparable to those found in more traditionally serious forms of artistic expression. The cultural phenomena surrounding the release of both Infinity War and Endgame, including sold-out midnight screenings, social media campaigns to avoid spoilers, and collective viewing experiences that resembled religious or sporting events more than typical movie attendance, demonstrated that the Marvel Cinematic Universe had achieved a level of cultural significance that transcended normal entertainment consumption. The box office success of both films, with Endgame temporarily becoming the highest-grossing film of all time, proved that audiences would support ambitious, interconnected storytelling that required years of investment and attention to fully appreciate. The financial success validated Marvel's long-term approach to franchise development while establishing new standards for what blockbuster entertainment could achieve both commercially and artistically. The critical reception of the Infinity Saga's conclusion, while not universally positive, generally acknowledged the remarkable achievement represented by successfully concluding so many character arcs and storylines in a way that felt emotionally satisfying while maintaining the spectacular action and visual effects that audiences expected from Marvel productions. The films demonstrated that blockbuster entertainment could support genuine thematic depth and character development without sacrificing commercial appeal. The legacy of the Infinity Saga extends far beyond its immediate impact on the Marvel Cinematic Universe to influence how entertainment companies approach franchise development, shared universe creation, and long-term storytelling across multiple platforms and formats. The success of this approach inspired numerous attempts to replicate Marvel's model, while also establishing new expectations among audiences for interconnected storytelling and emotional investment in ongoing character relationships. The conclusion of the Infinity Saga marked the end of an era in both the Marvel Cinematic Universe and in blockbuster entertainment generally, demonstrating that it was possible to create commercially successful films that also provided genuine emotional depth, thematic sophistication, and artistic achievement. The success of this ambitious experiment in interconnected storytelling established new possibilities for what entertainment could accomplish, while proving that audiences were hungry for complex, long-form narratives that respected both their intelligence and their emotional investment in beloved characters. The cultural transformation that Marvel has achieved over more than 8 decades extends far beyond the boundaries of entertainment to encompass fundamental changes in how society understands heroism, diversity, and the power of storytelling to shape collective values and individual aspirations. From Stan Lee's revolutionary vision of inclusive superhero narratives to the global phenomenon of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Marvel's influence has permeated education, social movements, economic structures, and the very fabric of modern popular culture in ways that continue to evolve and expand with each new generation of creators and audiences. Stan Lee's foundational philosophy of representation and social responsibility established Marvel Comics as more than a commercial enterprise. Quote, "It became a cultural force that actively promoted tolerance, understanding, and the radical notion that heroism was not limited by race, gender, nationality, or social background." Lee's famous rallying cry of "Excelsior" became more than a catchphrase. It embodied an aspirational worldview that encouraged readers to strive for excellence while embracing diversity and rejecting prejudice in all its forms. The X-Men, created during the height of the civil rights movement, served as perhaps the most powerful metaphor for social acceptance and the struggle against discrimination ever developed in popular culture. The concept of mutants as a persecuted minority, whose differences made them both feared and essential, provided young readers with a framework for understanding prejudice, while offering hope that society could evolve beyond its current limitations. The ongoing relevance of this metaphor, which has been applied to discussions of race, sexuality, immigration, and religious freedom, demonstrates the enduring power of Marvel's approach to social commentary through fantastical storytelling. The international expansion of Marvel's cultural influence began with the global distribution of comic books in the 1960s and 70s, but it truly exploded with the worldwide success of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Films like Black Panther demonstrated that American superhero stories could celebrate non-Western cultures while achieving unprecedented commercial success, proving that diversity was not just morally important but economically vital for reaching global audiences who hungered for representation in mainstream entertainment. The economic impact of Marvel's cultural dominance extends far beyond box office receipts and merchandise sales to encompass fundamental changes in how Hollywood approaches franchise development, international co-production, and the integration of entertainment properties across multiple platforms and formats. The success of the Marvel model inspired entire industries to adopt interconnected storytelling approaches, while demonstrating that long-term planning and audience investment could generate more sustainable profits than traditional approaches focused on immediate returns. The transformation of comic book conventions from niche gatherings of collectors into massive cultural events attended by hundreds of thousands of people reflects Marvel's role in legitimizing geek culture and making previously marginalized interests part of mainstream social discourse. San Diego Comic-Con, New York Comic-Con, and dozens of similar events around the world have become important economic engines for their host cities, while serving as crucial platforms for cultural exchange and community building among fans from diverse backgrounds. The phenomenon of cosplay, where fans create elaborate costumes to embody their favorite characters, represents one of the most visible manifestations of Marvel's cultural impact, while demonstrating how passive consumption of entertainment has evolved into active creative participation. The time, skill, and resources that cosplayers invest in their craft rivals that of professional costume designers and performers, creating a parallel economy of specialized materials, workshops, competitions, and social media platforms dedicated to this form of artistic expression. Academic institutions have increasingly recognized Marvel's cultural significance through the development of courses, research programs, and scholarly publications that analyze superhero narratives as legitimate forms of literature and social commentary. Universities now offer classes in comic book studies, superhero mythology, and the cultural impact of franchise entertainment, treating Marvel's creations as worthy of the same serious analytical attention previously reserved for traditional forms of high culture. The psychological research surrounding superhero identification and inspiration has revealed that Marvel's characters serve important functions in helping individuals develop moral reasoning, cope with adversity, and imagine possibilities for personal growth and social change. Studies have shown that children who identify strongly with superhero characters demonstrate increased pro-social behavior, greater resilience in facing challenges, and more sophisticated understanding of ethical decision-making in complex situations. The educational applications of Marvel's characters and stories have extended from informal learning through entertainment consumption to formal curricula, designed to teach everything from scientific concepts to historical events to social justice principles. Teachers have discovered that students who might be disengaged from traditional educational approaches become enthusiastic learners when academic content is connected to characters and storylines they already care about and understand. The influence of Marvel's visual aesthetic extends throughout contemporary design culture, from architecture that incorporates superhero-inspired elements to fashion that draws on costume design principles developed for comic books and films. The sleek, technological look of Tony Stark's laboratory has influenced real-world workspace design, while the Afrofuturist vision presented in Black Panther has inspired everything from interior decoration to urban planning concepts that blend traditional African aesthetics with advanced technology. The charitable initiatives and social causes championed by Marvel, its creators, and the actors who portray its characters have channeled the cultural influence of these properties toward concrete social benefits. From Stan Lee's advocacy for civil rights to the environmental awareness promoted through various storylines to the mental health resources provided in response to fan needs, Marvel has consistently used its cultural platform to promote positive social change beyond mere entertainment. The global reach of Marvel's influence has created opportunities for cross-cultural dialogue and understanding that extend far beyond the entertainment industry. International audiences have found in Marvel's stories universal themes of courage, sacrifice, and hope that transcend language barriers and cultural differences. While local creators have adapted Marvel's storytelling techniques to explore their own cultural traditions and contemporary challenges, the digital revolution has amplified Marvel's cultural impact by creating new platforms for fan engagement, content creation, and community building that operate independently of official corporate channels. Fan fiction, fan art, online discussions, and social media communities have transformed passive entertainment consumption into active cultural participation, with fans becoming creators, critics, and cultural ambassadors who extend Marvel's influence into every corner of global digital culture. The influence of Marvel's approach to character development and moral complexity has extended throughout popular culture, inspiring creators in other media to adopt similar approaches to hero and villain characterization. Television shows, novels, video games, and other forms of entertainment now routinely feature the kind of psychologically complex protagonists and morally ambiguous antagonists that Marvel pioneered in superhero storytelling. The economic ecosystem that has developed around Marvel's cultural properties includes not just direct merchandise and media sales, but entire industries focused on analysis, criticism, speculation, and fan service. YouTube channels, podcasts, websites, and social media accounts dedicated to Marvel content have created full-time careers for thousands of content creators, while providing platforms for cultural commentary that rivals traditional media criticism in reach and influence. The impact of Marvel's characters on individual identity, formation, and self-concept has been documented through countless personal testimonies from fans who credit specific heroes or storylines with helping them through difficult periods, inspiring them to pursue particular careers, or providing them with models for ethical behavior and personal growth. These individual transformations, multiplied across millions of fans worldwide, represent a form of cultural influence that operates at the most personal and profound level of human experience. The integration of Marvel's characters and themes into political discourse demonstrates the extent to which these fictional creations have become part of the shared cultural vocabulary that society uses to discuss real-world issues. Politicians reference superhero stories in speeches, activists adopt superhero imagery in protests, and social movements use Marvel's narratives as frameworks for understanding and communicating about complex social problems. The therapeutic applications of superhero narratives have been recognized by mental health professionals who use Marvel's characters and stories in counseling and therapy sessions to help clients explore their own challenges, develop coping strategies, and imagine possibilities for positive change. The concept of the wounded healer, embodied by characters who use their own trauma as motivation to help others, provides powerful models for psychological recovery and post-traumatic growth. The influence of Marvel's storytelling techniques on journalism, documentary filmmaking, and other forms of non-fiction media has changed how real-world stories are told and understood. The Marvel approach of revealing character through action, building dramatic tension through interconnected storylines, and balancing spectacular events with intimate personal moments has been adopted by creators working in factual media who recognize the power of these techniques to engage audiences and communicate complex information. The generational transmission of Marvel's cultural influence has created families and communities where shared appreciation for these stories serves as a bonding mechanism and a source of common values. Parents who grew up reading Marvel comics share their enthusiasm with children who experience the characters through films and television, creating intergenerational dialogue about heroism, responsibility, and the importance of using one's abilities to help others. The academic study of Marvel's global impact has revealed how these American-created characters and stories have been adapted, interpreted, and transformed by different cultures around the world, creating hybrid forms of popular culture that blend Marvel's basic frameworks with local traditions, concerns, and aesthetic preferences. This process of cultural hybridization demonstrates how American popular culture exports, interact with, and are transformed by the societies that receive them. The environmental themes that have become increasingly prominent in Marvel's storytelling reflect growing global awareness of ecological challenges and the need for sustainable approaches to technological development and resource consumption. Characters like Thor, who embodies a connection between advanced civilization and natural forces, and storylines that explore the consequences of unchecked industrial development, provide frameworks for discussing environmental responsibility through entertainment narratives that reach massive global audiences. The technological innovations inspired by Marvel's depictions of advanced science and futuristic gadgets have influenced real-world research and development in fields ranging from robotics to materials science to user interface, design. Engineers and designers regularly cite Marvel's visual representations of future technology as inspiration for their work, while the practical problem-solving approaches demonstrated by characters like Tony Stark provide models for innovative thinking in technical fields. The cultural diplomacy functions served by Marvel's international success have created unofficial but significant channels for cross-cultural communication and understanding. When audiences around the world embrace American superhero stories while also seeing their own values and concerns reflected in these narratives, it creates opportunities for dialogue and mutual understanding that operate independently of official, governmental, or diplomatic channels. The legacy of Marvel's cultural impact continues to evolve as new creators, new technologies, and new social challenges reshape how these stories are told and understood. The fundamental vision established by Stan Lee and his collaborators, that heroic stories should promote inclusivity, celebrate diversity, and inspire readers to be the best versions of themselves, remains constant, even as the specific methods for achieving these goals continue to adapt to changing circumstances and opportunities. The ultimate measure of Marvel's cultural significance lies not in box office receipts or merchandise sales, but in the countless individual lives that have been enriched, inspired, or transformed by engagement with these characters and stories. The child who learns to stand up to bullies by imagining what Spider-Man would do. The teenager who finds the courage to embrace their differences by identifying with the X-Men. The adult who discovers the strength to overcome addiction by following Tony Stark's journey of redemption. These personal transformations represent the true cultural legacy of Marvel's contribution to human civilization and its ongoing evolution toward greater understanding, acceptance, and hope for the future. The hidden world of Marvel's production secrets and behind-the-scenes magic reveals a universe of creativity, innovation, and meticulous attention to detail that extends far beyond what audiences see on screen or read on comic book pages. These carefully guarded secrets, Easter eggs, and production techniques represent decades of accumulated knowledge about storytelling, visual effects, character development, and audience engagement that have transformed Marvel from a struggling comic book publisher into the architects of modern entertainment's most successful shared universe. Stan Lee's legendary cameo appearances across Marvel media represent perhaps the most beloved and widely recognized tradition in modern entertainment, evolving from simple guest appearances in comic book adaptations into elaborate productions that required their own dedicated filming schedules, security protocols, and creative teams. Lee's enthusiasm for these appearances transformed what could have been simple celebrity cameos into genuine narrative elements that provided continuity across different films and television series, while serving as a bridge between Marvel's comic book origins and its multimedia expansion. The logistics involved in coordinating Stan Lee's cameo appearances became increasingly complex as the Marvel Cinematic Universe expanded and Lee's age made travel more challenging. Marvel Studios eventually began filming multiple cameos during single sessions, creating a library of appearances that could be inserted into future films without requiring Lee to be present during principal photography. This forward-thinking approach ensured that his presence could continue across multiple projects while respecting the physical demands of his advanced age. The creative process behind Lee's cameos involved collaboration between directors, writers, and Lee himself to develop appearances that felt organic to each film's narrative while maintaining the playful, self-aware tone that had made these moments so popular with audiences. Some cameos were carefully scripted and rehearsed, while others emerged from improvisation and spontaneous interaction between Lee and the actors he was working alongside. The emotional impact of Lee's final cameos, particularly his posthumous appearance in Avengers Endgame, transformed these traditionally light-hearted moments into poignant tributes to his contributions to Marvel's success and his role as the public face of comic book creativity. The care with which these final appearances were handled demonstrated the genuine affection and respect that filmmakers and audiences felt for Lee's legacy. The intricate network of Easter eggs and hidden references that permeate Marvel productions represents a sophisticated form of storytelling that rewards careful observation and deep knowledge of comic book history, while providing layers of meaning that enhance repeated viewings and readings. These references range from subtle visual nods that only the most dedicated fans might notice, to major plot elements that connect seemingly unrelated stories across different media and time periods. The development of Easter egg culture within Marvel productions required creators to balance accessibility for casual audiences with rewards for dedicated fans, ensuring that hidden references enhanced rather than obscured the primary narrative. This delicate balance has influenced how other entertainment properties approach fan service and continuity, establishing templates for rewarding audience investment while maintaining broad appeal. The community aspects of Easter egg hunting have created entire subcultures of fans dedicated to analyzing every frame of Marvel films and every panel of Marvel comics in search of hidden meanings, future plot hints, and connections to other stories. These fan communities often discover references and connections that were unintentional, demonstrating how audiences actively participate in creating meaning from entertainment content. The evolution of Marvel's action sequences from simple fight scenes into elaborately choreographed spectacles represents decades of innovation in stunt work, special effects, and cinematic storytelling that have influenced action filmmaking far beyond superhero movies. The development of these techniques required collaboration between stunt coordinators, visual effects, supervisors, actors, and directors to create sequences that were simultaneously spectacular and emotionally meaningful. The practical stunt work that underlies even the most effects-heavy Marvel action sequences reflects the company's commitment to maintaining physical authenticity and performer safety while pushing the boundaries of what's possible in terms of spectacle and excitement. The training regimens that actors undergo to perform their own stunts, the safety protocols that protect performers during dangerous sequences, and the coordination required to blend practical and digital elements seamlessly have established new standards for action filmmaking. The wire work, fighting choreography, and acrobatic sequences that bring characters like Spider-Man, Black Widow, and Daredevil to life require months of preparation and training from both actors and stunt performers. The development of character-specific fighting styles that reflect each hero's personality, background, and abilities has created a vocabulary of movement and combat that distinguishes Marvel's action sequences from generic fight scenes. The integration of practical effects with computer-generated imagery in Marvel productions represents some of the most sophisticated visual effects work in entertainment history, requiring unprecedented coordination between multiple departments and vendors to create seamless final products. The decision-making process about when to use practical effects versus digital techniques involves considerations of safety, cost, artistic vision, and technical feasibility that must be balanced against tight production schedules and budget constraints. The costume design evolution across Marvel productions demonstrates how clothing and accessories can serve as storytelling devices, while also functioning as practical tools for actors and stunt performers. The development of each character's iconic look involves extensive research into materials, construction techniques, and symbolic meaning that extends far beyond simple aesthetic considerations. The technical innovations required to create costumes that can accommodate the physical demands of superhero action, while still looking appropriate for the character and story, have driven advances in textile technology, manufacturing techniques, and wearable electronics. The challenges of creating costumes that work under various lighting conditions, allow for necessary movement and stunts, and can be quickly repaired or replaced during production, have required costume departments to develop new approaches to traditional filmmaking crafts. The symbolic elements incorporated into costume designs often reference comic book origins, cultural traditions, and character psychology in ways that provide visual storytelling opportunities while serving practical production needs. The evolution of character costumes across multiple films reflects both technological advances and character development, with changes in appearance serving as external manifestations of internal growth and changing circumstances. The musical identity of Marvel productions has evolved from simple background scoring to sophisticated soundscapes that provide emotional guidance for audiences while establishing audio signatures that become as recognizable as visual elements. The collaboration between composers, music supervisors, and directors to create scores that enhance rather than overwhelm the storytelling has required new approaches to film music composition and production. The development of character-specific musical themes that can be woven together in ensemble sequences while maintaining their individual identity has created some of the most memorable film music of the 21st century. The process of coordinating musical elements across multiple films directed by different filmmakers while maintaining consistency and continuity has established new standards for franchise music production. The location scouting and production design that creates the visual world of Marvel stories involves extensive research into real-world locations, architectural styles, and cultural traditions that must be balanced against practical considerations of filming logistics, budget constraints, and story requirements. The transformation of ordinary locations into extraordinary settings requires collaboration between location managers, production designers, and visual effects teams to create believable environments for fantastic events. The economic impact of Marvel Productions on filming locations has created opportunities for local communities, while requiring careful management of the disruption that major film productions can cause to normal business and residential activities. The relationships developed between Marvel Productions and local communities have often resulted in long-term economic benefits and cultural exchange that extend far beyond the immediate filming period. The creation of entirely fictional locations like Wakanda, Asgard, and the quantum realm requires production designers to develop complete visual languages that feel authentic and lived in, while serving the specific needs of each story. The consistency of these fictional environments across multiple appearances requires extensive documentation and coordination between different production teams and visual effects vendors. The elaborate security protocols and spoiler prevention measures that surround Marvel Productions have become legendary within the entertainment industry, involving everything from fake script pages and code names to restricted set access and social media monitoring. The balance between maintaining secrecy and allowing enough information to generate audience interest requires sophisticated marketing strategies and public relations management. The psychological pressure that spoiler prevention places on actors, crew members, and marketing personnel has created new forms of workplace stress that require support systems and coping strategies. The development of techniques for discussing upcoming projects without revealing crucial plot points has become a specialized skill that affects how entertainment professionals interact with media and audiences. The fan theory culture that has developed around Marvel properties demonstrates how audiences actively engage with storytelling by attempting to predict future developments and identify hidden meanings in current content. The relationship between official Marvel content and fan speculation has created feedback loops that sometimes influence actual story development, while also providing valuable market research about audience interests and expectations. The improvisation and spontaneous creativity that occurs during Marvel Productions often results in some of the most memorable moments in the final films, demonstrating the importance of allowing creative flexibility within highly structured and expensive productions. The balance between careful planning and spontaneous discovery requires production management techniques that can accommodate changes while maintaining budget and schedule discipline. The outtakes, bloopers, and behind-the-scenes footage that provide glimpses into the lighter moments of Marvel Productions have become valuable content in their own right, humanizing the actors and creative teams while providing audiences with additional ways to engage with their favorite properties. The curation and presentation of this material requires careful consideration of what enhances versus what undermines the fictional illusions that the primary content is designed to create. The collaborative relationships that develop between actors, directors, and crew members during long-term Marvel projects often result in genuine friendships and professional partnerships that extend beyond individual films. These relationships contribute to the authentic chemistry and emotional connections that audiences perceive in the final products, demonstrating how behind-the-scenes dynamics directly influence on-screen storytelling. The post-credit scenes that have become a signature element of Marvel films represent a unique form of storytelling that rewards audience patience while setting up future narrative developments. The creation of these scenes requires long-term planning and coordination between different creative teams working on multiple projects simultaneously. The tradition of post-credit scenes has influenced audience behavior and industry practices, creating expectations that extend beyond Marvel properties to other franchises and entertainment forms. The balance between providing satisfying conclusions to individual stories while teasing future developments has become a crucial element of modern franchise management. The technical innovations and creative techniques developed for Marvel Productions have influenced filmmaking practices across all genres and budget levels, demonstrating how advances in entertainment technology and storytelling methods spread throughout the industry. The collaborative approaches, safety protocols, and production management systems developed for Marvel projects have become templates for other large-scale entertainment productions. The legacy of Marvel's behind-the-scenes innovations extends beyond their immediate entertainment value to encompass broader influences on workplace culture, creative collaboration, and the relationship between technology and artistic expression. The methods developed for managing complex creative projects involving hundreds of people and millions of dollars have applications in many other industries and creative endeavors. The documentation and preservation of Marvel's production history provides valuable resources for future filmmakers, researchers, and fans who want to understand how these influential entertainment products were created. The archives of concept art, deleted scenes, production notes, and behind-the-scenes footage represent a comprehensive record of creative processes that will be studied and referenced for generations to come. The future of Marvel stretches before us like an infinite canvas of possibilities, shaped by technological advancement, evolving social consciousness, and the eternal human hunger for stories that inspire us to become better versions of ourselves. As we stand at the threshold of Marvel's next evolutionary phase, the lessons learned from 8 decades of storytelling innovation, creative collaboration, and cultural influence provide the foundation for adventures that will push the boundaries of entertainment while maintaining the essential humanity that has always been at the heart of Marvel's greatest achievements. Phase 4 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe has already begun to demonstrate how the company intends to expand beyond the relatively contained narrative of the Infinity Saga into a more complex and diverse exploration of heroism, identity, and responsibility in an interconnected world. The introduction of characters like Shang-Chi, the Eternals, and America Chavez signals Marvel's commitment to representing the full spectrum of human experience while maintaining the spectacular action and emotional depth that audiences have come to expect from Marvel Entertainment. The challenges inherent in Phase 4 and beyond extend far beyond simple storytelling considerations to encompass questions of cultural representation, technological possibility, and audience expectation management that require unprecedented sophistication in both creative vision and business strategy. The success of Black Panther demonstrated that audiences worldwide were hungry for diverse perspectives and culturally specific storytelling, but it also established expectations for authenticity and respect that must be maintained across all future Marvel productions. The integration of streaming platforms into Marvel's content strategy has created opportunities for more intimate character development and experimental storytelling approaches that complement rather than compete with theatrical releases. The success of series like WandaVision and Loki proved that audiences would embrace unconventional narrative structures and complex thematic explorations when they were grounded in compelling character relationships and emotional authenticity. The multiverse concept that has become central to Marvel's current phase represents both creative opportunity and narrative challenge, providing infinite possibilities for character development and story exploration, while requiring careful management to avoid confusion and maintain emotional stakes. The success of Spider-Man: No Way Home demonstrated that audiences could embrace complex multiversal storytelling when it served genuine character development rather than simply providing opportunities for spectacular action sequences. The eventual integration of the X-Men and Fantastic Four into the Marvel Cinematic Universe presents opportunities and challenges that will test Marvel's ability to honor beloved character legacies while creating fresh interpretations that feel organic to the established cinematic universe. The decades of development that these characters have undergone in comics, previous film adaptations, and popular culture create expectations and attachments that must be respected, while also being willing to evolve and adapt to contemporary sensibilities and storytelling techniques. The X-Men's arrival in the Marvel Cinematic Universe will require particularly careful handling due to the social and political themes that have always been central to their appeal. The mutant metaphor for prejudice and discrimination remains as relevant today as it was when the characters were created in the 1960s. But contemporary discussions of identity, privilege, and social justice require more nuanced and sophisticated approaches than were possible or necessary in earlier eras. The challenge of introducing mutants into a world where enhanced individuals already exist will require creative solutions that honor the essential otherness that has always defined the X-Men while avoiding redundancy with existing Marvel Cinematic Universe characters and concepts. The gradual emergence of mutants as a distinct population with their own culture, challenges, and relationship to baseline humanity provides opportunities for long-term storytelling that could span decades of future Marvel content. The Fantastic Four's return to Marvel control presents different but equally significant challenges, as these characters represent the foundational concepts upon which the entire Marvel universe was built, while also carrying the burden of previous film adaptations that failed to capture their essential appeal. The family dynamic that defines the Fantastic Four requires actors and creative teams who understand that their relationships with each other are more important than their individual powers or their conflicts with external threats. The cosmic scope that the Fantastic Four brings to Marvel storytelling provides opportunities to explore themes of scientific responsibility, family loyalty, and the balance between exploration and caution that remain relevant to contemporary discussions of technological advancement and environmental stewardship. Reed Richards' scientific genius and moral flexibility, Sue Storm's evolution from support to leadership, Johnny Storm's growth from impulsive youth to responsible adult, and Ben Grimm's ongoing struggle with identity and acceptance provide rich material for character development across multiple films and media formats. The next generation of Marvel heroes presents opportunities to explore themes of legacy, mentorship, and social change through characters who inherit both the abilities and the responsibilities of their predecessors, while facing challenges that require new approaches and fresh perspectives. Characters like Miles Morales, Kamala Khan, and Riri Williams represent not just diversity in representation, but evolution in storytelling that reflects changing social values and cultural priorities. The relationship between established heroes and their successors provides opportunities to explore how wisdom is passed between generations, while also examining how each generation must adapt inherited principles to address contemporary challenges. The tension between respecting tradition and embracing change that characterizes these relationships mirrors broader social discussions about progress, continuity, and the balance between stability and innovation. The global expansion of Marvel's storytelling to include perspectives, cultures, and mythologies from around the world reflects both commercial opportunity and moral responsibility to represent the full spectrum of human experience in entertainment that reaches audiences across every continent and culture. The success of films like Shang-Chi and The Legend of the Ten Rings demonstrated that authentic cultural representation could enhance rather than limit commercial appeal when handled with respect and genuine understanding. The development of Marvel content in collaboration with creators and production partners from different countries and cultural backgrounds provides opportunities for cross-cultural exchange and mutual understanding, while also expanding the creative possibilities available for future storytelling. The challenge lies in maintaining the essential Marvel identity while allowing for genuine cultural specificity and authentic local perspectives that enrich rather than dilute the overall Marvel experience. The technological advancement in filmmaking, animation, and interactive media creates possibilities for Marvel storytelling that extend far beyond traditional film and television formats to encompass virtual reality, augmented reality, interactive streaming, and other emerging platforms that blur the boundaries between passive entertainment and active participation. The development of technology that allows audiences to experience superhero adventures from multiple perspectives or to participate directly in Marvel stories represents the next evolution in entertainment, consumption, and creation. The artificial intelligence and machine learning technologies that are beginning to influence entertainment production provide tools for creating more sophisticated visual effects, generating realistic digital characters, and even assisting in story development and character creation. The ethical considerations surrounding the use of these technologies in creative industries require careful thought about the balance between technological capability and human creativity, artistic authenticity, and employment opportunities for human creators. The environmental themes that have become increasingly prominent in contemporary Marvel storytelling reflect growing global awareness of climate change, resource depletion, and the need for sustainable approaches to technological development and social organization. Characters like Thor, who represents the connection between advanced civilization and natural forces, and storylines that explore the consequences of unchecked industrial development, provide frameworks for discussing environmental responsibility through entertainment narratives that reach massive global audiences. The space exploration and cosmic adventure elements that have always been part of Marvel's appeal take on new significance as real-world space technology advances and humanity begins to seriously contemplate expansion beyond Earth. The questions about exploration, colonization, and the responsibilities that come with advanced technology that Marvel stories have explored for decades are becoming increasingly relevant to actual human development and decision-making. The social justice themes that have been woven throughout Marvel's history continue to evolve to address contemporary issues of inequality, representation, and systemic change while maintaining the hopeful vision of human potential that has always been central to Marvel's appeal. The challenge lies in addressing serious social problems without losing the sense of wonder and possibility that makes superhero stories inspiring rather than simply depressing or preachy. The mental health awareness and trauma recovery themes that have become more prominent in recent Marvel stories reflect growing social understanding of psychological well-being and the importance of addressing mental health challenges with the same seriousness as physical threats. Characters who struggle with post-traumatic stress, depression, anxiety, and other psychological challenges provide opportunities to normalize discussions of mental health while showing that even heroes need support and healing. The technology ethics and artificial intelligence themes that are becoming increasingly relevant to Marvel storytelling reflect real-world concerns about the development of advanced technology, the responsibility of creators for their innovations, and the potential consequences of artificial intelligence development. Characters like Vision, Ultron, and Tony Stark's various AI assistants provide frameworks for exploring these complex issues through entertaining narratives that make abstract concepts accessible to general audiences. The community building and collective action themes that have always been important to Marvel stories take on new significance in an era of global communication, social media activism, and grassroots organizing. The emphasis on teamwork, mutual support, and shared responsibility that characterizes the best Marvel stories provides models for addressing large-scale challenges that require coordinated responses from diverse groups of people with different skills and perspectives. The educational initiatives and literacy programs that Marvel has developed to support learning and personal development demonstrate how entertainment properties can serve broader social functions beyond simple diversion and escapism. The use of beloved characters and engaging storylines to promote reading, scientific literacy, social awareness, and critical thinking skills shows how commercial entertainment can contribute to educational goals and social betterment. The therapeutic applications of Marvel's characters and stories in counseling, social work, and healthcare settings demonstrate the profound psychological impact that well-crafted narratives can have on individual well-being and recovery. The use of superhero stories in helping people cope with trauma, develop resilience, and imagine possibilities for positive change shows how entertainment can serve genuine healing functions in addition to its recreational value. The economic opportunities created by Marvel's continued expansion include not just direct employment in entertainment production, but entire ecosystems of supporting industries, from specialized software development to costume fabrication to location management services. The ripple effects of Marvel's success create opportunities for entrepreneurs, artists, and service providers who find ways to contribute to or benefit from the Marvel entertainment ecosystem. The international co-production opportunities that Marvel's global success has created provide platforms for cultural exchange, technology transfer, and mutual learning between different film industries and creative communities. The development of Marvel content in partnership with creators and production companies from different countries enriches the stories while also building relationships and understanding between different cultural perspectives. The fan community engagement and user-generated content that surrounds Marvel properties demonstrates how modern entertainment consumption has evolved beyond passive reception to active participation and creative collaboration. The fan fiction, fan art, cosplay, analysis, and discussion that Marvel properties inspire represents a form of cultural activity that extends and enriches the official content while providing creative outlets and community-building opportunities for millions of people worldwide. The preservation and archival efforts surrounding Marvel's history ensure that the creative legacy of 8 decades of innovation will be available for future researchers, creators, and fans who want to understand and build upon what has come before. The documentation of creative processes, the preservation of original artwork, and the maintenance of comprehensive databases of Marvel content represent important cultural heritage activities that serve educational and historical functions beyond their commercial value. The eternal cycle of renewal and reinvention that has characterized Marvel throughout its history suggests that the company's future will continue to balance respect for established traditions with willingness to embrace change and innovation. The core values of heroism, responsibility, and hope that have defined Marvel's identity since its inception provide stable foundations that can support endless variations in character, story, and format while maintaining the essential spirit that has made Marvel beloved across generations and cultures. The ongoing evolution of Marvel reflects humanity's continuing need for stories that inspire us to be better than we are while acknowledging the challenges and complexities of real human experience. As technology advances, society changes, and new generations of creators and audiences bring fresh perspectives to these eternal themes. Marvel's future promises to be as rich, diverse, and surprising as its remarkable past, proving once again that the best stories are those that grow and change with us while never losing sight of the fundamental truths about courage, compassion, and the power of imagination to transform both individuals and the world around them. As we reach the end of our journey through the Marvel Universe, we're left with more than just facts and figures. We're left with a sense of wonder about the infinite possibilities that human creativity can achieve. From the modest offices of a struggling comic book company to the global entertainment phenomenon that spans decades and touches billions of lives, Marvel's story is ultimately a story about the power of imagination to transcend limitations and create lasting meaning. These characters, creators, and stories have become more than entertainment. They've become modern mythology, teaching us about responsibility, heroism, sacrifice, and the enduring strength of hope, even in the darkest times. They remind us that anyone can be a hero, that with great power comes great responsibility, and that together we are stronger than we could ever be alone. So as you drift off to sleep tonight, let your dreams be filled with the cosmic wonders of the Marvel Universe. Dream of soaring through the skylines of New York with Spider-Man, of exploring distant galaxies with the Guardians, of standing alongside Earth's mightiest heroes as they face impossible odds with unwavering courage. Rest well, true believers. The adventure never truly ends. It just pauses between issues, waiting for tomorrow's new possibilities to unfold.